Blog Talk Radio.
He is the last of his kind. All that remains of a once powerful nation. Some think he is a myth. Some believe he is the chosen one, who will bring balance to a world at war. And some will stop at nothing to destroy him.
Welcome, everybody, to Morris Talk Live 100. I'm your host, Tahaka Amana El Bay, and today we will be dealing with Down on the Courtroom Floor and Shake the Firm. Our special guest will be King Morpheus L. He's going to tell us the story of what happened in this ordeal inside that courtroom, how he was able to deal with them. Victory on the courtroom floor, survival for our children. The brothers come up with a very, very unique system in dealing with our children for survival. How do we shake it up? The economic survival system. How are we going to use that? Well, that's just some of what we're going to cover here this evening. And but before we start, we're going to go to a commercial break, and we're going to give our guests a chance to call in. The number to this broadcast is 310-982-4184. After the first hour, we will be opening up the lines. If you got questions or comments for our guests, you'll be able to ask these questions, okay? So y'all hold on tight. Let's do this commercial. We will be right back.
Brr, it's cold outside, and you made it to work safe and sound, but you didn't have time to fix your lunch. Don't worry, Auntie's Home Cooking and Catering is here for you. Simply give us a call, and we'll bring lunch to you. A fresh and delicious home-cooked meal at an affordable price. We here at Auntie's bring over 25 years of restaurant and food preparation experience to the table, and all of our meals are prepared according to quality and safety policies and regulations. Be sure to check out our website to request service at www.auntieshomecookingandcatering.com or call Sharon Hunter or Felicia Camara at 469-206-6523. Again, that's 469-206-6523, and we'll bring lunch to you.
We are where we are in this life because of the actions we have or have not taken. You don't wait until war break out to start making ammunition. You make your ammunition in peacetime. Look up the word mortgage in Black's Law Dictionary. You will find the word lien. Now ask yourself a question. Do you need a lien? How can you say I'm being blessed? I just got a lien. Come on, man. Let's use a little common sense here, and let's start freeing up some capital for investment. Let's examine these things. Let's get all the information on it. Go to www.newdebtelimination.com. Contact me, Tahaka Amana El Bay, 904-303-9061 before 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Let's go to work on this thing. Let's make the ammunition now.
Okay, Mose, we back. We're waiting our guest to dial in. But I want to talk to you about the survival aspect of what we deal with here in growing your own food and stuff of that nature. If you're on your computer, you can look at the photographs that's there, and those photographs are photographs of plants and stuff that we grow down here in Florida. Some of them are growing in Jacksonville. Some of them are growing down in a little further on down in South Florida. However, we got your mango trees, we got grapefruits, we got oranges, we have tangerines, plums. We grow grapes, wild grapes, and we have gardens and stuff. And we want to encourage everyone to do that. I know a lot of us live in regions where we are unable to grow fruits and vegetables the way we want to year round. But you can still do that simply by growing your food inside. You don't have to be out outside. And it behooves everybody to do that. If you got a place in your house where you can put some pots down and grow you some stuff and get in the habit of doing that so you can have something in the event of an economic collapse. Because a child doesn't understand when you say you don't have any food. He doesn't understand that. And see, we want to make sure that we stay one step ahead of that. And this is something that we don't want to postpone. This is very, very important for us to get this done now. If you live in an apartment, I don't care where you're living at, you can grow you some food. You can use your. I had an apartment, and out on the front porch, we had these wooden beams that went around, and I had hanging plants, and I arranged those plants where they got sunshine, and I was able to grow some magnificent plants right there on my front porch, and it was awesome. I had some inside and some outside, right there in the apartment. So it doesn't matter where you are. You want to make sure that you're growing your food. Now, keep in mind, after the first hour of this broadcast, the lines will be open. So if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and raise your hand. I'll open up the line so you can get in. The number to dial into this show is 310-982-4184. Just press the 1 on your dial, and that you can speak to the host. That'll give me an indication that you are there, okay? And I can open up the line so you can get in. But in the meantime, just like yesterday, we was talking to our Sister Highly Favored. She was online with us, and she was telling us about the story of what happened to her. Today, we see where the Florida Times Union, which is a newspaper here in Jacksonville, has run a story claiming that this lady had committed some fraudulent acts. She had fraudulent ID and passport fraud, and it's amazing because what they do is they get the police report. In other words, we're not going to try to contact the victim. We're going to get it from the enemy, and we're going to go on what the enemy says because you don't have any say so. If the cops say you did it, you did it. It doesn't. Police corruption, none of that plays any part in it. We don't need to talk to you about anything. We just need to know what they say you did, and no matter what it is. And of course, we found out last night about all the fraud, the racketeering, denationalization, conspiracy, the debauchery, the whole ball of wax. The courts, the police department, the county, the city, the state, all of that was brought out last night. But today, here's the newspaper running this ad that as if she had done something wrong, you see. So it's important for us to continue to get the truth out and continue to file lawsuits against corrupt officials and have these people removed, have this thing shut down so that the burden of enslavement can be lifted from everybody's cooperation in this thing. Because this is not just going on in Jacksonville, Florida. This is going on across the nation. I mean, it is one of the biggest scams in recorded history, this kind of behavior that's going on between the people and people that they are putting in office and voting into office, it immediately goes into a state of corruption and fraud and racketeering and the whole ball of wax. So I'm encouraging you all to help us and participate. We got some names here, and we're going to run these names off for you so you can know who's participating in this thing down here. We got a man by the name of Mr. John H. Rutherford. He's the sheriff. Mr. David M. McDonald. David M. McDonald, owner of Liberty Bail Bonds. Mr. R. E. Walker, supervisor of Sheriff Department contractor. Mr. McIntosh, Sheriff Department contractor. Mr. Hole, Sheriff Department contractor. Mr. C. M. Wilpert, Sheriff Department contractor. Mr. M. C. Blayton, Sheriff Department contractor. Mr. Rick Scott, governor of the state of Florida. Mr. Joel Stelma, court administrator. Mr. Ramon De Leon, U.S. State Department, U.S. Deputy Marshal. Mr. Ronnie Fussell, Duval County Clerk of Court. Mrs. Richardson, officer of the court. Mr. Jerry Thomas, court officer. Rivera Mara, court officer. Mr. Jody Phillips, court officer. And other officers who refuse to identify themselves that's participating in the following acts. This transmission is being dispatched to all major media outlets in the United States of America, as well as the United States. Public, state, and federal officials included, including the office of the President of the United States and other corporate entities. The above listed people are some participating in the following: abduction, fraud, racketeering, grand theft, obstruction of justice, denationalization, false charges, hostage holding, conspiring in a criminal network, falsification of lawful documentation, confiscation of lawful documentation, performing unlawful acts of bodily attachment to non-living entities, unlawful restraint, false imprisonment of native people, violation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, destruction of the people's freedom of right to travel, and failure to give full disclosure of law, robbery, unlawful confiscation of Federal Reserve notes in excess of $400 for Moorish nationals, civil rights violations, conspiracy against rights, deprivation of rights, oath of office violations, employee misconduct, armed intimidation inside a public courthouse, physical assault and battery against free Moorish nationals, and abduction in public courthouse, terrorism, failure to provide identification, out of uniform and hiding badges and badge number, interstate transportation of stolen property, human trafficking, obstruction of common law grand jury, obstruction of common law grand jury filings, attempted murder, and abduction of common law grand jury members. Now, this is some major stuff that's going on. Last night we gave you the Dun and Bradstreet numbers, clearly showing you that these people are operating in private companies. And we're under the impression that the courtroom has something to do with government. No, these are private companies for profit. The state of Florida, for-profit company. The city of Jacksonville, for-profit. County of Duval, for-profit company. The judicial courts, for-profit company. Private companies. The sheriff's department, private companies. These are just corporations masquerading as lawful government. But we're not going to get down in that. We did that last night. I just want to reiterate this information so you can go back and catch last night's broadcast. Very, very important broadcast that we done where the sister actually told the story of what's going on, what happened to her, what happened to her son, and what's currently going on down here in this city. And I'm pretty sure that it's going on across the country as well. Okay? Now, until my guests get in, we're going to do some little short plugs and stuff. And I told you that we were going to be dealing with the history of African origins of Christianity and find out where this thing come from. We're going to get all the nuts and bolts and wiggle pins of this stuff and get this stuff down until my guests arrive. So y'all hold on so we go in, okay? All right.
Churches all over the place, and all of them have these white images. Everything is white. Nothing to indicate there was an African presence anywhere in the land. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about first let's look at the land and try to get some kind of perspective on what Israel was like during the Bible time. Abraham. Who is this Abraham? Where does it come from? Let's talk about it, and let's hold the land of Canaan and Palestine in perspective. If you can give us some overview and background.
I want to approach it in several different directions. One is, since it's the one we're most familiar with, the biblical direction. And in the book of Genesis, when it goes over the genealogies of human beings, according to the Israelite view, it says that Ham, who was noted as the ancestor of the Africans, and we're not going to deal with the curse of Ham here now, because that was not in the original Genesis record. We're just going to deal with Ham as a great ancestor according to Hebrew tradition. That his sons were, he had 4 sons, and they were Cush, Mizraim, Punt, and Canaan. Now, Cush, we know, came to be known as Ethiopia. Cush, the Cushite Empire spread all over the world. But that was the Hebrew name for them. They probably had another name for the Nuba, was the proper name for the people. Nuba because they came from Nubia. The Mizraim was the Israel Hebrew way of saying Kemet, or as the Greeks later called it, Egypt. And Punt was their way of saying Puanet, which was Somalia. And Canaan was that on the Palestinian Strip. Now, interesting thing about Canaan is that Canaan is right there at the tip of the Fertile Crescent. Now, the heart and center of that Fertile Crescent is in the Nile. That was the richest producing soil in the world at that time. So why many people wanted that Palestinian strip of the land of Canaan is because of the wealth there at the tip of it. This biblical version lets you know that the Canaanites were in fact descendants of Ham, who everybody generally agrees were African people, Africoid people. The word Canaan itself is describing they're also called Phoenix, which describes a red, purple, or mahogany-colored people. That's what Canaan and Phoenix mean. The two words are synonymous. Now, this strip was very vital because whenever the Asian would attack Africa, they would have to cross Canaan to get to it. And whenever the African was going to repel the Asian or to stop the Asian in their tracks or to conquer Asian territory, they would go across that bridge. Now, the Hebrews who came in the days of Abraham, and I want to get this clear understanding, there was no Hebrew in the world before Abraham. And the proper term is Harabu, as Dr. Yusef Bento-Chanan writes in African Origin of Major Western Religions. And it meant one who had crossed over the river. And that is because Abraham came from a place called Ur of Chaldea, which was the remnants of the ancient Sumerian Empire, the land of what they call the blackheads, or the black-headed people. They were very black people. He came out of that land. Now, we assume that he was a black man, but even if he wasn't, his descendants spent over 430 years in Africa mating with Africans, and was only 77 of them under Jacob who went there, and they come out 3,160,000 strong in Egypt. Yeah, or what they misnomer Egypt, in Kemet, but what the Bible calls Egypt. So, but we can, I think, safely assume that Abraham was indeed a black man. He originated from Ur of Chaldea, not out of the sky, not of any place else. And also, just to put a footnote here, the oldest bones, the oldest remains dating about 50 to 70,000 years that have been found in Palestine, where Canaan was, in the Palestinian Strip, are Africoid in all their features. From the osteological study, it shows dolichocephalia, the long head, steatophagia, the big ample posterior. From the bones, we can tell all of that. The platyrinia, the broad nose, the thick lips, all of these are Africoid features. These are the oldest features in the land. At that time that Abraham was traveling out of Ur of Chaldea, the Europeans or even the Eurasians had not settled in any significant amount in the land. They had made incursions and attacks, but they had not settled. And one of the reasons why Abraham was leaving Ur of Chaldea was because the word was out that the Scythians were going to attack that land again, what is called Chaldea. They were going to attack that land. The Greeks called it Mesopotamia, the land between the two rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris. Now, these Scythians were Indo-Europeans who, when they went to battle, they went buck naked wearing a black cape. And the first person they felled in battle, they bit them in the neck and sucked the blood out of them to get their power and strength as a symbol of their conquest over that person. Now, they had attacked Chaldea 200 years earlier, and Abraham heard the devastation that they brought. So he knew that they were coming in, so he decided to leave. Now, in order for him to settle in Canaan, he had to go to the nation or the empire that had control over that land at the time, that was Kemet. So he had to go into Kemet and get permission from the officials, not the Pharaoh, because Abraham was not of a status that he could stand before the Pharaoh and speak to him. You had to be a world dignitary to do that, and he wasn't. He wasn't even a tribal leader yet. He didn't even have a good clan at present. He wasn't even a chieftain at this time. This was in the year approximately 1675 BCE. That's before the Common Era. This is the first Hebrew anywhere that gets permission from the Kemetans, and he goes and begins to settle with his family in Canaan. Now, it's doubtful that he had over, we would be generous to say he had 20 people in his family at the time. So that is the beginnings. Now, he has a son called Isaac, and Isaac has a son, and he also has a son called Ishmael. He has Isaac by Zerah, who is from Ur of Chaldea, a black woman, probably, on all probability. We know that Hagar is a black woman from out of Kemet, because Kemet was predominantly black people. There was no more than 10% or 11% white population there at any time, and that was mostly during the days of the Greeks, and this is long before the Greeks come. And he had two sons by these two women, and Isaac had Jacob. And in the days of Jacob had 12 sons who became the patriarchs of the 12, what later became the 12 tribes of Israel. These are all black people we're talking about here now. Now, Jacob is living in Palestine at a time, according to the Genesis record, of famine strikes. And so he has to go to the place that has the most abundance of food. Everybody's flocking to that place at that time, and that's Africa, the continent of Africa, to Kemet. So he goes to Kemet and settles there. And his family, and it's only 70 to 77 of them when they go in. I want you to understand that. It's only 70 to 7 of them. In all probability, they were black people. We have no doubt about that. But even if they weren't, when they went in only 70 to 77, and they come out, they stay there in the Nile Valley for 430 years, according to their records. Now, there's no record of them being enslaved. And had they been enslaved, had there been that many slaves there, they would have, because they came out over 3 million strong, had they been slaves, it would have been recorded, because the Kemetans recorded everything. Even if they hadn't recorded it, Persia would have recorded it, India would have recorded it, because they were recording everything in the world there. They were literate people. But they come out, the Bible says, the Exodus record says, that they come out 600,000 men, plus women and children. The average family consisted of 5 children at that time. They had a lot of children. Many of them had several wives. So we can safely estimate it's 3,100,000 and some odd thousand coming out there. They are essentially African, with an African religion, because their leader at the time is Moses. And Moses is described by Jethro's daughters as an Egyptian. They don't describe him as an Asian or anything. They describe him as an Egyptian. And the Egyptian was noted for their dark color and their Africoid features. And this is happening around 1200 This is about 400 years after Abraham has been there, almost 500 years. This is happening around 1200 BCE. And Herodotus, the Greek historian, not the father of history, one of the first Europeans to record history, but not the father of history, he says in his day, which was around 450 BCE, that the Kemetans, or the Egyptians as they called them, were jet black people, just like the Ethiopians and the Chaldeans. So they were now, 800 years later, still jet black people. So when Moses, when the Jethro's daughter see him, they describe him as a black man. Also in the biblical story, it says when Moses is receiving his call at the burning bush, and he is reluctant to accept the call, then he is told to put his hand in his bosom, and when his hand comes out, it's white as snow, and it frightens him. Then when he agrees to answer the call, he's told to put his hand back in his bosom, and it's back like it was before. Now, if it was white when he pulled it out and it turned back to its original color, that should give us some indication that the man was not a white man. That he was obviously a black man, as was all of the Israelites at that time were black people. Now, as time went on, there were constant invasions from the north in Israel, as there was in Kemet and in India and Arabia and other places, where the lighter races began to dominate the north and drive the darker races further south. So there was this admixture going on, this miscegenation by force of a conquering force. However, the Hebrews were generally reluctant to mate with people outside of themselves, even other black people, often outside of themselves, their tradition and their religion. Their prophets were very strict about that. Now, it isn't until the days of the Greeks that we get this very light population beginning to come in, but they're not dominant. And the Greeks come in about 300 BCE, and then, of course, the Romans follow them in 30 BCE. And that's when you start getting a light-skinned population, but still they're predominantly dark-skinned people. Now, when Jesus appears on the scene, he is of the tribe of Judah. And of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel, Judah is the navy blue-black tribe. Now, how do we know that? When you go back in the book of Genesis, you find that they are mixed with Hittite, Jebusite, all kind of ites. And Dr. Justice taught us in the seminary all those ites were black because all of those ites came from Ham and came from Canaan. And Canaan was the son of Ham, and the ites were the grandson of Ham. So they according to even the biblical record, these are obviously Africoid peoples. Now, the Jesus tribe of Judah maintains more of its color. Some of the other tribes are a little mixed, like we are today, from chalk to charcoal. They as a result of invaders. But the tribe of Judah produced the kings. And in order for you to become a Christ or an anointed one, you had to come out of that tribe, and that tribe had to maintain more closely than any other tribe its genetic features, physical features. The very word Christ itself is from the Indian word Krishna, as Joel A. Rogers tells us, which means the black one, the anointed one. To be anointed as a Messiah, you had to be kissed of the sun. You had to be a child of the sun. This was tradition throughout the whole ancient world. So here Jesus comes now, born of the tribe of Judah, and obviously a very black man when you trace his lineage. When you look at the 2 birth certificates of Jesus, and his proper name is Yeshua, because there was nobody named Jesus. That's not a Hebrew word. Yeshua, meaning God will deliver us, or our liberator. The same as in the Old Testament, they call it Joshua. When you look at the 2 birth certificates, one in Matthew and one in Luke, and you trace his lineage, you find all these Africans in there. You find all these Hamite, as they call it, the quote-unquote, use white folks' term, Hamitic tribes, because there was no difference between the Shemites and the Hamites. They were of the same racial stock. In fact, the Bible says very clearly, in Amos, the 9th chapter, in the 7th verse, it says, "Are ye not as the children of Egypt and Ethiopia unto me, O Israel?" Which was bespeaking the fact that they were the same racial stock. Now, another reason we know that Jesus was a black man is that the most ancient, the oldest icons of Jesus shows him as an African. And probably the most noted one is in the British Museum, and there are many, of the coin minted by Justinian II in the 8th century of the Common Era, or what is sometimes called the Christian era. In the 8th century, by Justinian II, Emperor Justinian II of the Roman Empire. And what it has on one side of the coin is a man with obvious Africoid features, kinky hair, kind of corn-rolled looking hair, broad nose, thick lips. And it has in Latin, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. On the obverse side of the coin is an Alpine-looking person with the straight hair of the European and Europoid features. And it says Emperor Justinian II. So you can clearly distinguish who is who. This is in the British Museum even unto this day. Joel A. Rogers has printed it in his books. Dr. Ivan Van Sertima in his Journals of African Civilization has printed it. And it's been shown in many other works, scholarly works. Now, getting back now, when the Romans come, going back in time now, when the Romans come in 30 CE, or BCE, I'm sorry, before the Common Era, and take power from the Chemitans in the days of Cleopatra VII, they also take Palestine and they take Syria and several other nations in that area. This white nation, this European nation now, begins to dominate the indigenous people in Palestine and in that part of Africa known as Egypt, there in the Nile Valley. When they do this, there is constant resistance, especially on the part of the Israelites. They're constantly involved in warfare to fight against them. And there were always these messiahs rising up that the Romans had to deal with. So what you have essentially is a white power, European power, dominating a black nation on its own land. And this power had as its symbol the eagle. It also had as its governing body the Senate. The same as you have in the United States of America today, which is merely an extension of the Roman Empire. Now, they were oppressing these people on their own land. In the day that Jesus ben Joseph was born, or Yeshua ben Joseph, the one we know the most, because there were so many men named Yeshua at that time. In the day that he was born, he became one in a great line of messiahs whose purpose was to prepare his people to be delivered, primary purpose, from the Romans. Now, often in Christian theology and mythology, they have you thinking that Jesus was totally detached from the political activity going on in the land. That would have been impossible for him to do and get the attention of the masses, because the masses' primarily concern was to get liberation from the Romans. His very name bespoke that. Thou shalt call his name Jesus, or Yeshua, because he shall save his people from their sins. Which meant we think they're talking about saving them from committing adultery or something like that. It's talking about the word sin as used in the New Testament and used in the English language today comes from the word which means imbalance. And when one is being enslaved by another, especially in their homeland, that is an imbalance. So they would be saved from their imbalance. That is what they were looking for. They weren't looking for any other type of deliverer, and he couldn't have gotten the masses out had he been talking about anything other than that. When the Romans crucified him, they didn't crucify him for teaching nonviolence. They did not crucify him for starting a new religion. The Romans couldn't have cared less about somebody starting a new religion, because they had so many in the empire already. It didn't make any difference. One new one didn't make another god. That's all it was. What they were concerned about was he stirred up the people. That was a charge brought against him, even in the New Testament. And what they arrested him for and what they crucified him for was daring to call himself a king, the king of Israel, which was political office. And the Romans said that the only king that could exist in Israel as long as they had power in that land, as they were dominant in that land, was someone whom they had appointed. And therefore, they crucified or assassinated him on the cross for that reason. No other reason. reason. They didn't have anything. They didn't care about him being the Savior of the world. They never even thought about anything like that. Now, after the death of Jesus, the assassination of Jesus, the movement which he helped to perpetuate it had already been started, but he really carried it to the fore. It was called the Nazarene Party. There was no such thing as Christianity when Jesus was alive. Even in the book of Acts, it tells you they were first called Christians in Antioch. This is well after the death of Jesus. This is when the Apostle Paul and his Barnabas goes there, that they are called Christians. Now, here it was called the Nazarene Party. And one of the main contingents of that party was the Zealot contingent. They were the fighters, the soldiers who fought against the Romans and led all kind of insurrections against them. And he had several of them among his disciples. So what he was trying to develop was what we would call today a black united front. Because we find in the Nazarene Party, if you read your New Testament very carefully, you'll find in the Nazarene Party that you had members from the Pharisee Party, from the Sadducee Party, from the Zealot Party, and from the Essenes. He was covering all bases. So he had a united front there. Now, after his death, for a while it brought confusion. And then Peter and James and John took over the leadership and stirred up the masses once again. Then they were in turn killed. They say Peter was crucified upside down, and others were, most of the apostles met with some type of martyrdom. Well, after this now, the struggle goes on for independence of Israel. There's another person comes along whom they would call in the Latin language Jesus, another Yeshua, and this is Yeshua ben, let me make sure I got him right. Is this Ben Elia ben Kakba? Yeshua ben Kakba is the next one to come along and to lead a revolution as a Messiah. See, we think there was only one man named Jesus or Yeshua. But in Jesus' day himself, when he was a little boy at 12 years old, there was Yeshua, or as we would say, Jesus ben Judah, who had led a revolution and was crucified. And when Jesus was 12 years old, to get home in Nazareth, he had to walk up a road through several thousand crosses of Israelites hanging on the cross, and at the head of it was one whom you would call in today's language Jesus, son of Judah. So he had that experience at 12. He himself had the experience, Jesus, son of Joseph, just using the Latin language now. And then after him, there is Jesus ben Kakaba, who leads a revolution. Then there's Jesus ben Menachem, who leads another one, and which goes now, Jesus, the one that we talk about, is crucified about 30 of the Common Era. They assassinate him. The movement is still going on and continues to build. The Nazarene Party continues to build. And I tell you what, you can get some good information on this. Dr. Hugh J. Schoenfield. He's a Jewish writer. He does a very good job on it. 2 books, 3 as a matter of fact, and they are The Passover Plot, The Incredible Christians, and The Jesus Party. Those are essential books for having an understanding of what was going on historically. Now, he doesn't put it in an African-centered context. We have to do that. But he gives you a good historical overview of what was taking place. We try to detach Jesus of the Bible from history, and you can't do that because he was a part of that history. The same as that people would come along later and try to detach Dr. King from the history and the movement that was going on in our time, or carrying on our time, or to separate Malcolm, to just take his philosophy and separate him from the actual movement that was going on. You couldn't do that logically. But when the European Christians took over, which we're going to get to in a minute, they were able to do it by force of arms. Now, a groundswell arose until by 66 of the Common Era, the Romans said, we tired of these black folks down there in Israel constantly rebelling. We got to stop this once and for all. It's getting out of hand. So Titus brought his troops into Palestine to attack Jerusalem. He was called back by, was it Vespasian? I'm trying to think of the name of the emperor at that time. He was called back to Rome. So he stopped short. He had laid siege to Jerusalem, but he stopped short of conquering it. And at that time, the Nazarenes and the Zealots thought that they had the upper hand. And they were chasing the Romans out of the land. So they thought they had won. So for 4 years, they thought it was all over. We're getting rid of these Romans. The Romans come back in 70 under Titus. And this time when they come back in full force. And they come back with the baddest legion in the Roman army. Unfortunately, Africans, the 10th legion, called the leopard men. They used Africans to conquer African people. That's exactly what they did, a methodology used by Europeans all the time. They burned down the city, totally destroyed. I mean, they laid it to siege. Over 100,000 people died. Where blood flowed as high as a horse's halter in the streets, they said. People were eating each other by the end of it. Many of them did escape. Most of them went back to Africa, the origin where they came from. Some went up into Europe and became the later known Jews. Many went up into India and became the Khazars, what they call the 13th tribe. Those that went into Europe became the Ashkenazi and hooked up with the Germans. They were African when they got there, but after much admixture, they were more German than they were African. Now, at this time, the Romans are totally dominating the land. The capital of the Israelites is just burned down. Not one brick is left upon another. It's burn it down to the ground. That's all there is to it. It is not even considered the Holy Land at that time. Those Hebrews that are of the diaspora, they look to it. They look to their homeland. There, especially the ones who are in Egypt. And that's where a lot of your gospel writing goes on then, those who settled in Egypt. At this time, there's still no Christian movement. You still have Nazarenes continue to fight even up until 135 of this era, and the Romans only finally stopped this movement almost totally at Masada. In 135, at the fort built by Herod. After that, Palestine is nothing in the eyes of the world. Christianity is focused now in Rome because let me correct that. It is at this time focused in Africa, where the original Christian churches developed, in Carthage, which they call Carthage, and in Alexandria, and then down in Ethiopia. That is where your Christian powers and your church fathers and your saints at that time are Tertullian, who brought made the Latin language the language of the church, the Latin language, which actually was mostly Punic at that time, an African language, which Hannibal the Great spoke. And after him came Augustine. Origen came after him. Cipriani, Augustine, Perpetua, all of these were Africans there who were the bishops of the church. Now, you had some churches in Rome, and the Romans were here and there, but the strength of the church, the African church, still maintaining its African consciousness and culture, is in Africa. Not having the political force it had as the Nazarene party, because it had to start playing a lot of that down to keep those Romans from beating up on them. But they are strong. They're going strong until the Romans decide that it is just too costly to keep taking them to the Colosseum and feeding them to lions and to keep killing them. There's only one way to deal with this thing. And this happens now in about 311 of the Common Era. Constantine the Great, they call him. His mother, I'm trying to think of his mother's name. It's not Monica. I'm trying to think of his mother's name. It doesn't come to me. Is converted to Christianity. And she says, you got to stop killing these people. You got to stop killing. By this time, it has been Europeanized and everything. It's using a lot of its Africanness and its original meaning. It continued to be a strong force against invaders of Africa for a good while. Even after the Romans took it over, it was a strong force against invading Arabized Muslims for a long time, as Dr. Chancellor Williams points out in The Destruction of Black Civilization. Now, I'm running a little ahead of myself here. Well, Constantine then becomes converted, and he says this. He says, I want all of you bishops of these various churches to meet with me at the Council of Nicaea, which is now in Turkey, in the year 325 of the Common Era. Because at that time, Christians were going into the arenas, the very arenas that the Roman, Imperial Rome had used to feed them to the lions and to crucify them and burn them at the stake, and they were going in slaying each other over which gospel was the right gospel and which gospel wasn't, and which form of Christianity was the right one and which was. I mean, there was a lot of splinter groups going on, and they were fighting each other. Constantine said, we have to have one codified system of belief. So he called these bishops together, African bishops included. It was at this time that the African church lost control. The African bishops who went to the Council of Nicaea, at the head of that group was Arius. And at the Council of Nicaea, the European bishops, 310 of them, said, this is what we're going to believe, and this is what we believe, that Jesus was born of a woman without the aid of a man. Now that was not even imagined before this time. That he is not only the Son of God, but he is one and the same essence with God, therefore is God. He did not have a wife and children, which was utterly insane. Because every record, every other gospel said that he had wife and children. Some said he may have had 2 wives. Because you have 4 gospels in the New Testament now, but you had at least 70 in circulation at that time. Gospel meaning good news, and was another term for biography on the life of Jesus, is what it was. Now, they took the 4 gospels they could best edit and bend to the system of belief and doctrines they wanted Christianity, Eurocentric, let me be very clear on that, Christianity to adapt. Arius and the African bishops from Carthage and from Alexandria and from Ethiopia, they said, no. This is not true, what you're saying. And the European bishops said it's true if we want it to be true, and we have the army of Constantine to back it up. And if you don't agree with it, get out. So they ran Arius and the Africans out of the council. They had to go up in the mountains to find refuge to keep from being killed. And they led their struggle from there, which somehow spread up into Germany. Arianism went all the way up into Germany somehow, and was a constant struggle with European Christianity. It was then that the Roman Church took over, and that the power began to be transferred from Imperial Rome to Papal Rome. Still, Palestine is of no significance. This thing they call the Holy Land is still of no significance. It's concentrated, the church is concentrated in Africa, now it's being concentrated in Rome. A political movement started by an African in Palestine is now taken over, and its headquarters is in Rome.
Where was the headquarters in Africa?
It was in Jerusalem. Oh, and in Africa, it was in Alexandria. The church at Alexandria. And I'm trying to think of the one in Ethiopia, the oldest one there, the Coptic church. And I cannot think of the city. Aksum, that's right. The city of Aksum, the oldest there. And Karhara, what they call Carthage. Those were the centers of Christianity at that time. Because Jerusalem was gone, man. So this was the center. When the Romans took it over, the African church almost essentially kind of cut itself off. And it didn't even look to Rome anymore until they were attacked by the Arabs. That's when they asked the Romans to come help them. Now, it continues to grow in Rome, but it doesn't have the power and force in Europe it wants to, because the rest of the tribes in Europe, because at that time there was no England, there was no France, there was no Germany, it was Gauls, Britons, they were tribes. They didn't have any nations then. And they had been controlled by the Roman Empire for a long time. In fact, one of the greatest emperors who brought peace to the wild Britons for over a century was Septimius Severus. In 198 CE. And he died, as a matter of fact, in Britain from the cold up there. He was an African emperor of Rome who refused to eat Roman food. He had his food imported from Africa because they had to have the spice of it. And he spoke Latin with an African accent. And he was African in culture. And went back to Kemet into Egypt to visit there so he could learn about his ancestors, and had the bones of Rome's worst enemy dug up and buried in a marble and gold sepulchre in the center of Rome itself, the bones of Hannibal, of Cardatus. This is the audacity this black man had. But he was such a great general. He controlled the army, and whoever controlled the army in Rome at that time was the emperor. Well, he died about 211, I believe. And then now we get back to Constantine, which is 325. We come back up to that. After Constantine, several other emperors come along. The empire had fallen apart. You had the Byzantine Empire in the east, and you had the Western Roman Empire, which was much of nothing. It was in the year 538 CE that the Roman army, directed by the Pope of Rome now, not by the emperor, the Western Roman army directed by the Pope of Rome, finally felled the last Arian resistance in Europe. And that was when they took the power from Clovis, who was a Gaul, and that made the Roman Catholic Church the dominant power in all of Europe at that time. Now, mind you, this church, which was supposed to be walking in the shoes of the fishermen, did not come into power with prayer. The Holy Ghost didn't bring it into power. It came into power with the sword. When Constantine said to them, whatever you decide, I'm going back to 325 now. I know I keep jumping back and forth. He said, whatever you decide, that will be the doctrine of Christianity. And I will back it up with the army. So, consequently, what we believe about Christianity today was not brought about by Jesus, was not brought about by the apostles, was not brought about by God. It was brought about by the army of Constantine and perpetuated by the Roman armies in support of the Pope once he took power completely. Now, a new power came on the scene that had to be reckoned with. A new star arose in the east. A black man with frizzly hair, jet black man, as Jolie Rogers tells us, born to the Quraysh tribe in Arabia, became a prophet of a new religion called Islam. And one of the main people in Islam, as the prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah said, whose father was al-Matalib, his grandfather, a jet black man. The third part of Islam was Bilal ibn Hazrat ibn Rahab was his name, Bilal, who was a servant at first to the Prophet Muhammad and then became an equal partner. It was Bilal who developed most of, and a lot of Muslims don't like to admit this, the theology of Islam, the theology of paradise. You get the 70 black virgins if you die in jihad. If you're brave, you go straight to paradise. You get 70 black virgins, perfumed virgins, who are all yours. The tree of, the divine tree of life, which stretched, I think, 150 miles or something like that. All of this mythology that came in paradise. It was Bilal. Bilal brought the azan, the calling of the azan, to call to prayer and all that. Now, there is some question as to whether the Prophet Muhammad was illiterate.
Okay. All right, Morris. Before we get down into, because there's more, I just want to stop for a minute because we're going to have to, we're going down to the close of the first hour. If anyone have any questions or comments, 310-982-4184. Go ahead and push one on your dial, open up the lines, and you can let me know what's on your mind. We're going to take another quick break, and then we will be back with some more of this information. Our guest that was scheduled to be here this evening has not arrived, and we are still waiting on him to show up. If he does not show up, the show got to go on, right? Okay, so y'all hold on.
If you live in the Dallas area, you already know it's cold outside, and you just arrived home after a very long day and have no desire or idea about what to prepare for dinner, well, it's Auntie's Home Cooking and Catering to the rescue. Let us deliver a tasty and delicious dinner to your doorstep, prepared with fresh and wholesome ingredients and love that will bring you back time and time again. Our Southern-style menu is sure to put a smile on every face at the dinner table. So what are you waiting for? Go to our website to request service at www.auntieshomecookingandcatering.com or call Sharon Hunter or Felicia Camara at 469-206-6523. Again, that's 469-206-6523, and let us do the cooking for you.
4, their dark color and their apricoid features. And this is happening around 1200.
Okay, check this out. The entire U.S. operates on contracts. Everything is about a contract. We have to learn how to create our own contracts and enforce them. Instead of always being a victim of somebody else's contracts they enforce, let's launch some of our own. Go to www.newdebtelimination.com. Contact me, Tahaga Amana El Bey, 904-303-9061. We don't have to continue to be a victim. We can do something about this thing, man. And once you learn the rules of the game and you learn how to formulate your own contract and how to enforce them, it's on and popping. Give me a call, 904-303-9061 before 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Go to newdebtelimination.com.
Okay, we back, Morris. Now, earlier I was talking about survival and growing your own food and all of that stuff. And we are going to get back to the remaining segments in this thing about the origins, the African origins of Christianity and religion and this stuff, and which is nothing compared to what we're having today. We just have religion, and it has absolutely nothing to do with what was originally created. The Africans had connections to the earth. They had connections to nature and a spiritual aside, but this thing that we have today is religion. This is anyway. I'm not gonna go there. I'm gonna just let the man continue to tell the story. But after this is over, then we're gonna come to you and show you how to transform a neighborhood into a thriving community. And what are the mechanics? How do you go about doing that? How is this thing set up? How do we do it? And we got blueprints for that, so we're gonna bring that to you at the end of these segments as we continue into this thing and learn about what took place. We had a guest scheduled this evening. He's not here, so the show must go on. So y'all sit tight as we go on.
Was a literate man or not? There's question to that. Now, there are many Muslims that will argue you down, but there's a question about that. But getting back to it, this new force rising was a refreshing force. Many of the Jews embraced it because the Eurocentric Christians had been oppressing them. But this force now it started out good, like most religions do. But once it became a religion of the state, it became an orthodoxy. And when it becomes an orthodoxy, it means you can only believe what has been defined and accepted by that organized religion, and anything beyond that is not tolerated. That means your mind cannot go beyond that. It puts a ceiling, a cap on your intellect and your intellectual growth. The Christians had done that. The Roman Christians had done that with orthodoxy, but they were burning people at the stake for being heretics. The Muslims now began to do this after the death of Muhammad, the prophet, and it became a state religion eventually. Their thing was conquest. And they went to spread Islam, not with prayer, but with the sword. Just like Christianity was spreading with the sword. And they attacked the African Christians next door to them at Aksum, and then they went on and attacked in Egypt, and they went on to attack in other places. And these Africans, in trying to fight off these Arab attackers, began to call upon the Byzantine emperor to help them, saying, we are Christian brothers after all. Prior to this time, the Africans had paid very little attention to the European Christians. They said, we need your armies to help us, so let's fight these off. This struggle goes on for several centuries. It is in 1096 that Pope Urban I of the Roman Catholic Church is invited by the Byzantine emperor to come help them fight the Muslims, because the Muslims is kicking everybody's butt. Everybody took Persia, they'd taken Constantinople, and they just taken everything in their path. I mean, they were throwing down. They were warriors, and they were driven by the fanaticism of their belief. You know, you tell a man that if he dies in battle, and that every battle is a jihad and a holy war, if he dies, he's going to get 70 jet black versions, he gonna fight hard. So this is a very difficult thing to combat. I mean, it's a psychology like this. So they psyched up, man, when they go into battle. When they go into battle, Allahu Akbar, man, that was a hard thing to reckon with. Plus, the Christians were not as skilled as them. The Muslims were more agile. Their horses were faster. The Christians had these knights with all this heavy armor on, and they were crude fighters. Well, they were getting their butts kicked, and they called on the Western Roman Christian Empire. And they called on them to come for help. And that's when Pope Urban I, in 1096 of the Common Era, went throughout the land preaching crusade. And the purpose for the crusade, because they couldn't get them when they first sent the letters and asked them, they wouldn't go. And so the Byzantine emperor said, but there's a lot of money in it. If you come here and help us, you can open up the trade door with India, Persia, and China in the east. You don't have that trade now. And you're all over there dying from all kind of sickness and diseases, and all the medicines you have are over here in the east. Y'all need, your food is spoiling, all the things you need to preserve your food and to get spice to your food, so you're eating maggots every day. They were. The meat was going bad, and they were eating maggots and worms every day. Said, all you need to stop that is right here in the east. And we've been controlling it, but we're going to let you have some if you come in here and help us get these Muslims off our back. So Pope Urban went throughout the land preaching crusade. That was the first crusade in 1096. And that was the beginning of going to Palestine, because the Muslims controlled Palestine at that time. And they had built the mosque to Abraham and things to Hagar and all that stuff there, and to Ishmael. Then the European Christians come in and decide that they are going to make this a holy land for them, and they start building their little churches at what they say is where Jesus was born. Now listen to this. This is in 1096. Jesus is born somewhere between, who knows, 4 to 10 BCE. It's about 6 to 10 years off. We don't know exactly when it was. So this is what, over 1,000 years later, almost 1,100 years later, that they are now going to a place they have not been for millennia, and start picking out landmarks and calling them and saying, this is where Jesus did this, we're going to build a church here, and he did this here, we're going to build a church there, this is where Abraham went, we're going to build a church here. This was also at the same time that they began to sell splinters from the cross that Jesus was crucified on. They sold so many splinters from the cross that they said Jesus was crucified on, it could have sunk 10 ships. That's how many splinters they sold. They even went so far as they were selling hair from the head of Peter. They were selling nipples from the bottle that Jesus was suckled on. Nobody suckled a child with a bottle in those days. Not in Israel. They suckled from the breast of the woman. They sold so many foreskins from the head of his penis that was supposed to have been found there at the Temple of Jerusalem. There was no Temple of Jerusalem. It happened. The Romans had rebuilt the city and called it Capitolina something. I forget now. Anatolia Capitolina, I believe it was called. Anatole Capitolina. And it was nowhere like what it had been before. It is not the same Jerusalem. It had been totally destroyed. You couldn't find that stuff there. They didn't have the sophisticated archaeologists you have today who could go excavating that stuff. They didn't have that. They didn't have that kind of knowledge. So they just went there and picked them out some places and began what they figured was a general place where he had been. And they started building churches there. And they picked those places that the Muslims had been building their mosques because they were trying to take that power from them. Keep in mind, they used the religion as a force to motivate the people, but the objective was economic and for political control. And that's how all this thing about the Holy Land and all this imagery of white people, Eurocentric imagery, you will find when you go there today in these various churches in Bethlehem and in different places there. However, at the very same time, the most sacred icons in all of Christendom, and particularly in Europe, was of the Black Madonna and Child, and can be found in churches all over Europe even unto this day. The head of Christendom, of Roman Catholic Christendom, the Pope himself, John Paul II, when he goes to bed at night, prays to the image of a black woman and child, whom they call Mary and Jesus, Black Madonna and Child, and when he wakes up in the morning, the first thing he does is pray to this image of this black woman and child. And the first things he did when he was installed in the office of Pope of Rome was to take money from Rome and put it into the refurbishing of the church in Poland of the shrine of the Black Madonna. Now, these Black Madonnas are considered to be magical, and they bring them out every Easter and parade them among the people, and the people spend money on them and believe that they can heal them, but they keep them hidden away the rest of the year. Now, at the same time that they do that, on the other hand, they put all this white imagery around in these churches in the Holy Land, and consequently, our people, not knowing their history or the history of the place, will go there thinking that Jesus and the disciples and Mary and Joseph look like these images that these Europeans put there. And by the way, even when the Crusades started, and it went about 12 or 13 Crusades, and the Muslims beat them every time they went. Even during that time, they weren't using the white imagery. The white imagery did not really come to the fore until the days of Michelangelo, after they had driven the Moors out of Spain. It was at this time, the last stronghold of the Moors was in 1492. The Kingdom of Granada, January the 2nd, Christopher Colon was standing there with his hand out, waiting for the money. Once they had conquered Granada, once Abu Abdullah surrendered his sword while his mother cussed him out, by the way. His mother cussed him out, called him all kind of punk faggots, all the way to his retreat for giving up. She said, you should have died in battle. You shouldn't have given this up. He surrendered his sword unto Isabella and Ferdinand. Cologne was standing outside on January the 2nd waiting for some money so he could make this voyage over here in October. Now, with that, the Europeans had been so devastated psychologically by the overwhelming brilliance of the Moorish Empire, which was 80% African and 20% Arabs, and the Arabs were mixed. They were so overwhelmed by it that they were now in an identity crisis. and were seeking to find an identity for themselves. And that's when they began to commission works. That's what pope was that? Pope Leo, was it? That commissioned, or was it Pope Julian? It's either Leo or Julian. I get them mixed up here. Who commissioned Michelangelo to paint his aunt, uncle, and cousins as the first family. And that was the beginning of the European imagery, Eurocentric imagery, of putting what had been known throughout the history even of the European church, that these were Africoid people, that these were black people, and now began to put this imagery in the context of white supremacy. And they put it into those churches, and that was the beginning of the spread of the imagery of white people as the founders and promulgators of the original movement founded by Jesus, which came to be known as Christianity.
I have several questions to ask you, but I just went and saw that Ethiopian Zion, which is a display of religious art supposedly coming out of Ethiopia. And the majority of that art is of a European Byzantine depiction of Jesus the Christ, and it's very confusing for our people because they're hurting our children that deceive us. And in the history, the outline of history, they're taking the Ethiopian empire of Axum back to around 30 AD, somewhere around there. So people say, well, these are Ethiopians. They are some of the oldest Christians, and if they're painting Jesus white, surely they must have been what he's doing.
They're the oldest Christians, because that's where the Christian church developed in Africa. But the point that it must be remembered, when they called on the Byzantine emperor to help them fight against the incursion of the Arabs, when they called on, they had to pay a price for that. They called on this man to bring his army in, and that's when the influence of the Byzantine art and the Byzantine Empire was exerted upon the Ethiopians. But their oldest icon, their oldest images, the further you go back, you will find them to be more Africoid. But as you get on till about the 6th, 7th century, as you start coming up in there, you will see this Byzantine influence, and you will see these mixed people largely there. So that's how that came about.
Mm-hmm. Let me go back to the religion that Jesus is supposed to have. Let's talk about that for a while. I want to start with Abraham. What religion did Abraham have when he became a Hebrew? Even to the time that he went into Egypt, was it a one God-centered religion, or did he essentially come out of Egypt with that one God concept and all of the other essence that later became Christianity?
Okay, what has made it so confusing for people is that Africans generally always had a one God concept. I don't like the term God because the word's spelled backwards, but I'm using it out of convenience now. As Willis Budge says in the book, what he calls Egyptian Book of the Dead, actually it's the book coming forth by day or by night. In his translation of it, he begins in his introduction to state that these people in Kemet practiced essentially what was a polytheistic monotheism. And what does that mean? They believed in the one, for whom they never built a temple. They never had the audacity to say that they could fit it in the temple. They never said they had all the knowledge of it between the pages of their books. Now, Christianity claims that, Islam claims that, other religions claim it. They were so in awe of it, they said you cannot understand this one, which they saw as the divine intelligence, the permeator of everything in the universe, called the Neher-Nu. But you can see so many manifestations of this force in the different deities which Europeans call gods and goddesses. They were just different aspects of the one. Now, this was generally common among African people throughout that region. Now, Mother Reverence was the strongest religious system in the world at that time. And the maternal aspect of the Creator was emphasized because of the role of the black woman, the significant, very significant role, overwhelmingly significant role of the black woman in the creation of civilization. So that existed in Canaan. But the Hebrews somehow became more patriarchal, or the priests did. The prophets, became more patriarchal, and there was a constant struggle between the prophets and the priests because the priests leaned towards the mother goddess religion, and the prophets wanted to put the emphasis on the father. So there was always that struggle, and that's why the prophets were so vehement in all of the venom that they wrote about the mother goddess religion, and accused them of doing all kind of ugly things, which they did not do essentially in their practices. Now, Abraham, in all probability, because the prophets had not really grown, there were no prophets in Israel in that time. There was no Israel. Abraham, the first Harabu, or Hebrew as we call it, was following the religion that everybody else was following at that time, which was the mother goddess religion. They were all, and they had many manifestations of the one divine force in the universe. They didn't have many gods, they just had many manifestations of that force. Now, when he came, we don't even know if Abraham even had any understanding about a one God concept as we think of it today. They say he had that understanding, but that understanding was only made clear in the days of Moses. And Moses was merely carrying on that which he had been taught in the school of philosophy that he studied while he was in Kemet, which was the school of Atan, founded by Akhenaten, in the days of Akhenaten, who they say was the inaugurator of monotheism. It is not true. He just had another name that he gave to the sun. The Kemetans, the intelligent Kemetans, did not believe that the sun was God or the creator, but that it was the most visible manifestation of the God force for the solar system. That was scientific. I mean, when the sun goes out, God and everything goes out for you, because the sun is the regulator of everything here. So they saw the provision for this planet and the solar system of the creator, of what we must name a God, through the sun. And they called it Amun-Ra. And the priest of Amun-Ra was so strong for so many centuries. And therefore they controlled the government. They controlled the pharaohs. And the pharaohs had to come through them. But when Akhenaten comes along, he was going to buck all this. And this is over several thousand years old, and come up with another name, and still the sun now, as its central symbol, and call it Atan. And he's trying to reverse a political order. And the priests of Amun are too strong for him to do this. But he is not the inaugurator of monotheism. Moses obviously followed in that school. Dr. Ben, to use his words, he said, what happened between Moses and Ramses II during the 19th dynasty of Kemet? Moses being raised as a brother of Ramses II, being raised, according to the biblical story, by the pharaoh Setai I, jet black man. His daughter's jet black. His son, Ramses II, is jet black as kinky hair. So Moses is raised as a son, and which gives you another indication that he's a black man. Dr. Ben said what happened, to use his words, two niggas fell out over God. Ramses II said Amun-Ra. Moses came up with this thing about El Shaddai, the Lord of the mountain. So they got in a struggle over that. Now, whether Moses was asked to leave, whether Moses was put out, this whole story about Moses going to the Pharaoh and saying to him, going to Ramses II and said, let my people go, that's not recorded anywhere else but in the book of Exodus. If a whole army, that they say that the Pharaoh's army died in the Red Sea, a whole army in the most powerful nation on the earth at that time had been drowned, it would have been carved in stele all over the literate world at that time. Persia was literate. India was literate. Babylon was literate. All of those were literate nations. It would have been written in all those nations. The Greeks at that time were not literate. There was no Rome at that time. There was no Greece actually at that time. No European nation. There was no European nation. It was only tribes. None of them were literate at the time. But in every literate nation would have recorded something as significant as a whole army of the greatest ruler in the world, the ruler of Kemet, drowning in the Red Sea. If 3 million people had walked up to the Red Sea and Moses lifted up his staff and it parted, you would see that carved in stone there today. That's an awesome and a magnificent thing that would not have been unnoticed. It is only recorded in one place, in the book of Exodus. Just like the enslavement of the Hebrews is only recorded in the book of Exodus. Throughout the whole history, Dr. Sheikh Ansar Diab tells us, of Kemet, which the Bible calls Egypt, there were no more than 30,000 slaves. And they were people, mostly Eurasians, who had landed and did not act right. So they were made to work and pay for the wrong they had done. Instead of throwing them in jail, they put them to work. They made slaves out of them, servants. But there were not more than 30,000 throughout the whole history of the Khemerian Empire, which might have been as old as 18,000 years when you go back, if you put it at the founding of agriculture, which the story says Osar and Osset founded in the Nile Valley at the founding of agriculture, which dates back 18,000 BCE. Now, Egypt did not exist off of a feudal system, and you have to have a feudal system for slavery to go. They were not like the Romans or the Greeks. They didn't depend on slavery for their labor. The pyramids were not built by slave labor. They were built by contract, and they got records of the contracts there. This was contracted work. People built it and enjoyed building it. They built it while the Nile was inundated because they couldn't plant at that time, so they did something else. They built pyramids. But there were no slaves, certainly no Hebrews built them. The pyramids were built so much longer before Abraham came. The Great Pyramid of Giza could be, it's at least 7,000 years old. By the time Abraham got there, it was about 4,000 years old. So, and it wasn't but a few people with him, so they couldn't have built it. When Moses' people come on the scene, or were there, it's about 1,200 years. So they didn't build anything there. They were not enslaved there. Now, it could have been possible that this in the book of Exodus gives us a key. Said we have to do something about their birth rate because they may join our enemy when they come. Because the Hebrews, even though they were Africans, were known to be wishy-washy. They were with the Africans if the African was in power, but if the Asian came in, they joined the Asian. So they would go betwixt and between. They were not black people you could depend on. They only went for themselves, and they were very small people. But this is before they become a nation now. They're down there. They're not even a nation. They're still loosely scattered tribes of descendants of 12 sons of Jacob. And then Moses, for whatever reason, leads them out of there. They're going into Palestine. They get into Palestine. Moses dies. Joshua commits genocide against the people at the city of Jericho. That's genocide. They take land from another black people, the Canaanites. They take it. They take it in the name of their God. Say, God sent me to take this land from you. That's genocide. That's an act of genocide. There's no way you can justify it whatsoever. They say, well, we took it because you're heathen. The Hebrews bowed down to other gods, even Abraham, when he wanted Sarah to get pregnant. She didn't get pregnant. He went and got him a teraphim and put it under his pillow as a symbol to the great goddess of the universe to make his wife pregnant. So he was still into that. Moses, when the children of Israel were in the desert and were bitten by the serpent, he didn't tell them to go pray to God. He put a brazen serpent, if you remember the story, up on a pole and told them that everybody that looks up to this will be healed. That's a form of idolatry. That's a form of imaging. So now when the Hebrews accused everybody else of being heathen, they were doing the same practices. They did it throughout Israel. They were not as significant as a nation in the days of Moses, even in the days of Joshua. They spilled, after Joshua took them into the land of Canaan, they spent another 200 to 400 years. We're not sure on what the period is, probably 200 years, with intertribal battles. You read the book of Judges. And they're constantly killing one another. When one of the other surrounding Canaanite nations doesn't come in, the Jebusites, the Amalekites, and subdue them, and they constantly have to get liberators to get them from up under them. They do not become a nation until about 1000. This is over 200 years after Moses leads them out. So about 1000 BCE, in the days of King Saul, they get a king, but they're not an actual nation. It is in the days of David that they begin to take some form of nationhood. And it is in the days of David that they start to exterminate the indigenous people there in Palestine, known as the Canaanites. They begin to exterminate them. The Bible even says that according to their story, God commanded David to go down and kill everything that pisses against the wall. That's in the Bible. That's, I believe, in 1st or 2nd Samuel. 2nd Samuel. Man, woman, child, and cattle. Kill them all. That's how crude it was. That's how awful and horrifying it was. St. Augustine, one of the founders of the African Christian Church, said, if you believe the book of Genesis and the Old Testament, and you take it literally, you are attributing to God things unworthy of him. Because those acts were acts of human beings and their atrocities against one another. These were black people hurting black people. Wasn't even no white folks in it at that time. White folks weren't strong enough to do any real invading of the land at that time. They were hitting on the outskirts of things, but they weren't able to kick up any dust at that time. The Scythians had been beat back up into Europe, so they didn't have the strength to do it. So now they become a nation around 1000 BCE, but nobody even cares about them, nobody recognizes them to this one period that is outstanding in their whole history, and that is the period when Solomon is king. And Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop said it, and that is the only time that Israel is recognized in world history. And the reason why Solomon, who was about 960, he comes on the throne, and he reigns according to Kings, the book of Kings, he reigns for 40 years. The reason why Solomon has such prominence in the world and makes Israel prominent is because of world trade, and also the women he married. Most of the women among his wives were out of Africa and from African nations.
Well, let's talk about Solomon in terms of, was he an African? What at that time?
He, in all probability, was an African because the Hebrews were Africoid. They were dark-skinned people. They were black people. Let's face it. They were Kemetans and Cushites. They were all mixed up. And then they were mixed up with Canaan. There had been no significant incursion of white people in the land at that time. So they weren't mixed like that. They were very much maintained their color, their original color, which was a mahogany color. They were very dark people. Solomon was a dark man. Most of the women he married were dark-skinned women from dark lands. And their women came from places that possessed a lot more knowledge than Israel did. Israel was not a literate nation. They were not a scientific culture. All these sciences were brought from other lands. And when he brought these women in from these high culture lands, then they imparted to him knowledge, which made him appear so wise. But the story about Makeda, the queen of Sheba, going to see Solomon because he was wise is the way the Hebrews wrote it. Dr. Ben corrects that for us and tells us that she was going to check on one of her tributaries because Israel had to pay tribute to Cush, because Cush was mighty at that time in the land. So that's what she was going. Now, while they were there, it's possible they had a love affair. It's possible they hooked up and had what they call Menelik the First born out of it. But she was by no means subordinate to Solomon. And if anybody was awed and mesmerized by somebody's wisdom, it was probably Solomon being mesmerized by the wisdom of Makeda. because she came from the land where the women were renowned for their clairvoyance and their insight. In fact, most of the pharaohs, all of the strong pharaohs in Kemet, always made sure that their principal wives were from the south, from down below the first cataract, down in Kush, in Nubia, because those were the most insightful, clairvoyant women, the women of great wisdom. And so Makeda, she was a queen, a Kandaki, a queen in Sheba. So, I mean, that is one of the oldest empires in the world, the Kushite Empire, or the Nubian Empire, should be called. She was a queen there, so she had a lot more knowledge than Solomon. It was the priest out of Africa who went to Mount Carmel and set up the temple there. Solomon's temple was an extension of the mystery school out of Waret, or what the Greeks called Luxor. It was an extension of the school. It wasn't Solomon who originally, and that's one of the things that made him famous. It was the first time that anything like that had been set up in all Israel. And it was then that writings began to come into the land, from other lands, because they were not producing any writings themselves. People think that at the time that when they write in the Bible about what David did and what Solomon did, that there were people writing it at the time it took place. No, this was written hundreds of years after the fact. And as a historical reality, there wasn't any significant writing on the part of the nation of Israel until after they were taken captive by the Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar in the year 587 BCE. And that's when the priests decided they had better come up with a literary work, but they didn't have any jobs anymore, because there was no temple for them to set. Jerusalem was destroyed that time by Nebuchadnezzar, and it took several centuries for it to be built up. All the priests of Israel knew how to do was to make sacrifice and to do the incantations. The priests of Kemet were scientists. Not only could he do the ritual, he either was an architect or a mathematician, or astronomer or something, or physician. In Babylon, they were astronomers, physicians. So in Israel, they could only do one thing, like a lot of preachers today. That's all they could do, was do the incantations, make the sacrifice. But they could not do anything other than that. So when the temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar in 587 BCE, they didn't have no job. And here they were in Babylon in captivity, and so they had to come up with a way to keep the people coming, because the people now were going to the Babylonian priests because they had more to offer. So that's when they began to write a history of Israel in a religious context. And that's when the story in the book of Genesis, the stories in the book of Genesis about the creation of the world began to be written. And it took, after they began to write, it took some 1,500 years before they finally completed it to the form that we know it today. They started in 587. It wasn't until before the Common Era. It was in 90 CE that the Hebrews decided, that the Jews decided at the Council of Jamnia, 20 years after the destruction of their capital, that they were going to now codify the Old Testament and set the canon for it, the books that would go in it. That's when it was decided. Then it took another, how many years, the Council of Nicaea, that they decided to bring in a New Testament. There was no New Testament when Jesus was alive. There was no New Testament when the apostles were alive. In their letters to each other, they had no idea that people were going to look at them as sacred scripture. That was just like you and me. You and I writing a letter to each other. We had no idea that some people were going to come along later and say, this is the word of God. That wasn't even thought about. This was later that the Europeans decided that the Old Testament of the Hebrews was not enough for them. They needed something else. And that's when they began to develop a New Testament or Christian literature, and they incorporated the Old Testament into it. And that was not finalized until, good Lord, about, I'd say about 1400 of this era. And of course, in the days of King James in 1611 of this era is when they put the cap on it. when they were making the translation into the Anglo-Saxon tongue. So what we're looking at here, that is being projected to us as coming from God out of heaven and descending on the earth, as being sacred and divine, is the creation of human beings, mostly European human beings, cast in their image, so that we can always think of them as sacred and divine. So that deep in our psyche somewhere we will always think of the white man as God. As one tape, well, who was that scholar speaking, the historian, on the tape by Gorey Allen, when he talked about the fact that the white man made us call him master. And master is the term you use for your creator. Therefore, in calling him master, you're calling him God. And actually, in the New Testament, when they did that translation in King James Version in 1611, slavery was beginning, the English were beginning to come into the slave trade then. And that's when they put those texts in there about slave, obey your master. Obey your master as unto God, pleasing him in all things, no matter what he asks you to do. And even if you can get freedom, don't seek after it, because free or bondman, we are all slaves in Christ. They put all those kind of texts in there at that time. It is doubtful that the Apostle Paul wrote those things in his letters, and if he did write them, no wonder he was hated by the Hebrews, because he certainly wouldn't have been accepted by them if he was telling them to slavery of the Romans, and even if you can be free. In fact, he took, according to one letter of Philemon, he sends a slave back to his master after he escaped. So Paul, if he did in fact write those things, could not have been a friend of mine or been a friend of Jesus even. And we must keep in mind that Paul never met Jesus. Paul never walked with Jesus. He never heard Jesus. And he was in the desert for 3 years in the Arabian desert, and he came back with a revelation of his own, which the apostles were not in agreement with. So that even today there's a saying, robbing Peter to pay Paul. And that's where that came from. But Paul went to the Europeans. He went to Greece, he went to the Romans, and he collected money. The Nazarene movement, like the black nationalist movement today, is always broke. So they called them to Jerusalem. They said, what you're teaching isn't the book of Acts. It's not right. Jesus didn't teach that. But Paul said, I got this money from there. So they said, well, teach what you want to then, and just as long as you bring, because we know what Jesus was about and what this is about. You can tell the white folks anything you want to tell them. You can tell those folks in Greece and Rome anything you want to tell them, as long as you can bring this kind of money up in there. And on his way to Jerusalem, when they called him in at the council there, when the apostles who had traveled with Jesus called Paul in, it took him almost a year to get there, because he stopped in every city and picked up some money to take to the church of Jerusalem. And when he got there, he had all his money, and he laid in front of him, and the brother said, well, you know, he said, well, I'm the apostle to the Gentiles. They said, you sure are. With that kind of money, you're the apostle to the Gentiles. We are the apostles to Israel. We're teaching the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Because Jesus had said, go not into the way of the Gentiles, but go only unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Now, how did this thing get spread all over in Greece and Rome and all that? Paul came up with his own ideas and concepts, and at first they were going to fight him on it, but when he brought that money in there, they said, you're doing a good job. Send him all back out there. Send a dude with him. Send Barnabas with him. Barnabas with him. First time, and then the next time he went out, Silas went with him. But they didn't mind sending him on those missionary journeys, because every time he made that tour, he came back with money. But it undermined the movement, because Paul was a true wannabe. He wanted to be a Roman more than anything else. And the other thing he had going for him, he could speak and write in 7 different languages. It is doubtful that any of the apostles were literate, with the exception of maybe Matthew, who was a civil servant. So he worked in the tax department, so he was probably literate. He was a tax collector. He worked in the Bureau of Internal Revenue there, so he probably had some literacy to him. But the others, Peter, James, and John didn't. They were fishermen. They were bammers. They were wharf dudes from off the wharf, man. They didn't feel a need to have that literary education. They made their living from the sea. So that's how they dealt. All of the others were laborers. So you only had that one that we know of that was an intellectual, and maybe Judas Iscariot may have been literate. Now here comes Paul that can write, has been to several universities, the University of Tarsus. So that's why his letters in the New Testament, you have the 4 Gospels. Out of the 27 books in the New Testament, you got the 4 Gospels, 13 letters of Paul dominate the New Testament. 13 of them. And the Gospel of Luke and the Acts were volume 1 and volume 2 of the history of the Christian church that was being written by a friend of Paul who was a Syrian Greek named Luke, who was a physician. And because Luke and Paul were so close, Paul comes out to be a hero in the book of Acts. And Luke, therefore, in the year 140 CE, John Marcion, a European Christian, says that the Old Testament is just too crude. The God of the Old Testament is too violent. I can't deal with him. I can only deal with the gentle Jesus. And that's when he took the Gospel of Luke and the letters of Paul and said, this is the Word of God. But it wasn't until 325, almost 200 years later, that it became official. And it couldn't become official until you had the state power, the army of Constantine to back it up. And that's how you get the unadulterated Word of God, the New Testament. It does not exist in Jesus' day. It does not exist in the Apostles' day. None of that. Matthew could or could not have written. This looks like it was some Egyptian out of Egypt who wrote the book of Matthew. The book of Revelation has all that Kemeton imagery in it. So it was probably written there. Hugh Schoenfield does a very good job about that in the formulation of the New Testament. In that book, The Incredible Christians. So I guess, in essence, that kind of gives us an overview of how a land that originally started out going all the way back maybe 50,000 to 70,000 years with Africoid peoples in it, remaining primarily Africoid throughout the ages, even when Abraham came and settled there, even when Moses and the children of Israel went there, who were black themselves and mingled with black people there. Throughout the development of the kings, throughout the development of its nation, there after they had committed genocide against other black people, it was still a black nation. It is only, even when the Babylonians came, even when the Assyrians came and took them into captivity, it was still a black nation. They do not begin to be all mixed up until the Greeks come. Even when the Persians came, they remained a black nation. It's when the Greeks come now that they begin to have a mixture, and when the Romans come, they begin to have a mixture. They're still essentially a black race, so that by the time that Jesus arrives on the scene, it's still predominantly a black people, definitely a people of color like ourselves today. It is only after the destruction of Jerusalem and the Romans scattered it in the year 70 CE that we now have these light-skinned people coming back in the settled land. In fact, that's what the Romans settled, repopulated the land with, the Eurasians there, after they had run the black folks out of there. And those people you see there today are not the original indigenous people. They are people who came from other places and settled there.
Okay. All right, that's it. Now, all those good Christian folks, now's the time to raise your hand and straighten us out on this now. And show us where this man here, after giving us the ancient story and the historicity of the situation, y'all can come in and straighten us out. The number to dial in to straighten us all out is area code 310-982-4184. Press 1 on your phone, and you can come on in and straighten us out about this thing. and because otherwise, an unrebutted affidavit stands as truth. And here's a man that have gone through 9 segments, giving you blow-by-blow commentary on the African origins of the whole thing and how the criminals have falsified your ancient story. So we can come on in and prove where this man here is lined up. But now, we're not going to dwell on that. What we want to do is, I promise you that we're going to deal with this thing about how to transform our neighborhoods into thriving communities. I created a blueprint for that. I'm going to bring it to you here now, and so y'all can see how this thing should be done. It doesn't matter where you are in the United States, what city you're in, what state you're in. This is the formula for it. Now, you know, time. You're riding down the highway and you see a new development. There's a big sign posted out there, coming soon, Walmart, or coming soon, this building, that building. That's the territory that's been marked. You can go in certain cities and certain areas. They have what a little Haiti, a little China, a little Asia, or what have you. And there's always a big mural somewhere in their language, in their writing, clearly marking that territory. In other words, when you come in there, if you do go in there, you know what to expect. Okay, it ain't about you. We ain't trying to love everybody. This is us and us only. We're the only people on earth that got this thing trying to do something for everybody. And we ain't doing nothing for us. And we ain't got nothing. I don't understand that. But this is in the brain. You hear it over and over and over. It says the coming of the Moors, step by step. The Moors are the rightful owners of the land many call America. Their borders stretch from the border of ancient Kemet, north and southwestern shores of Africa, north, central, South America, and all adjoining islands. What the Moors have to unite, establishing their own economic base throughout the world. Now, this is just not in America. We got to, we get this thing going on. We got to export this all the way around the globe. And it's not something that we haven't done. We've already done this before. Been there, done that. Let's take one example in one city in America. First, they have to take money and invest in marking devices to clearly show all people where their community is located. For example, billboards with a giant fez on it and nothing else. That's just an example. Because anytime somebody come in an area and they see that, okay, we know that the Moors are there. Okay, we know that these people here, they don't think like no Negro colors and black. Okay, you can't shoot their children down in the street without repercussions, without a bloodbath. Okay, so we got that part. The billboards should be placed at every entrance and exit of their community. All stores that are not owned by Moors, African descent, must be boycotted. Each house in this community must be visited, and the resident must be informed in detail of the plan to own the community. Okay, that's first we mark the territory, and now we're going to include everybody in that satellite. You don't have to do this, but in one square block. One square city block, all the way around that block. We'll mark the entrance, we'll mark the exit, and we'll take control. And that's what's going on down inside that satellite. Okay? The Moors should never allow any money to leave their community after the boycott are over. And the people who are not Moors or people of African descent have been forced out by the boycott. Now the small donations from the community can be used to rent, own, stock, and control the buildings that have been vacated. The Moors should choose the best bank possible for deposits and reinvest in their community. Now we're talking about, we're not talking about your average bank. We're talking about credit unions. The Moors should begin immediately teaching and growing their own food. Each house in the community should be encouraged to grow food in their own yard or in pots, even if they live in an apartment. The Moors should gather the men of their community to provide protection, security, police, and enforcement by day and by night. Each man will simply ride through and walk through the community, and we're talking about around one city block, observing any and all activity with phone, walkie-talkies, or the latest communication devices, and a central base of dispatch in the time of situations of problems. Each house in this community must be protected. All major decisions must be addressed and scheduled weekly community meetings and agreed upon before action is taken and money is invested. All people in the community must have food, clothing, and shelter. Everybody in that satellite got to have that. There should be nobody in there without that. If there's somebody who ain't got it, the entire community must come together to make sure they have it. You got it? All political decisions must be agreed upon by the community, and the politicians contacted in advance to make sure they will provide agreement for concessions in return for community vote. Okay, so come down there, posting no sign about you running for office until you meet with the community and tell us what you're going to do when we put you in there. Now, if you don't do it, now we have a problem. Single-parent homes in the community. All single-parent homes in this community must be contacted and necessary support provided by the community. This community should welcome capital and commerce from people outside the community, but no setting up of shop. If they are not Moors and are not willing to follow the rules and guidelines set by the community, they must not be allowed to take up residence and must be asked to leave the community immediately, and the community police enforced. Violence, drugs, crimes, and all other problems that may arise. Okay. The remedy for such must be put into the bylaws and rules and must be strictly enforced by the men of the community by any means necessary. The people of this community should be offered self-defense classes, hunting and fishing skills, target practice, and other skills in the area, including access to communication with security forces 24 hours a day. The defense of this community should not be made of metal gates or bars, but should be constructed with cooperation, trust, protection, knowledge of self, watch, and the marker of the billboard with the feds on it. Security forces comprise the selected voices of the men who live in the community. They will enforce the community law. Young men will be taught by the men in the community at large. Communication between all residents must take place. A complete list of addresses and phone numbers, email addresses, and etc. Must be provided to each house of the community, whether they have a computer or not. The elderly must be protected at all costs. This is just a small part of what is going to happen in the outside of America, and this is just a small part of how you set that thing up. Okay, and it's all you need is just a group of people that's willing to do so. The first thing you got to do is mark your territory. The second thing you got to do is take your plan and blueprint and show each resident in that 1 square block how they can profit, what they can profit, where they can profit, why they can profit, when they can profit, who says they can profit, and what they can profit through benefits to be gained or losses to be avoided. That's how you do that. And everybody on the same page. Everybody is in agreement. Well, hey, I don't have nothing going on. If you're willing to do this, I'm behind you. I want to see what you're gonna do. And if you start taking shape and stuff, I'm really behind you. So before we go out and plant a garden somewhere, you got to come with a plan. You got to include all the people. The territory got to be marked. Otherwise, you are wasting your time and you are going nowhere. Okay? That's the bottom line of the situation. Step 1, mark the territory. Step 2, inform the community of what you're about to do. You need the cooperation of the community. If you got a church in that community that's located up in there, they got to be informed of what's going on. They got to participate too. Okay? This ain't about religion. This is about economics. If you got a church over there, what I recommend you to do, you can do all your Sunday stuff all you want to. But there should be a day when there's nothing discussed but economics and business for the community. Without religion, get rid of that. We ain't there to take up no collection, none of that, unless it's for the investment for economic development and nothing more. Okay? That's how you do that. You have public transportation coming through your area. You need to stop that. The way you stop that is men and women and people in your satellite that's on the same page with you. They can start using their vehicles and stuff to transport the elderly and different people where they need to go. Okay, so you don't need to stop up in here about nothing. We got this here. This blocked off. You take your bus and somewhere else. We don't need all that. We got our own transportation. We don't have to worry about drug dealers and none of that, because if we're coming in there to sell dope and we find out about it, okay, then you got to explain it to 25 or 30 men. Okay, explain to us, why you there doing that. Okay, outside visitation. You got to sign in, you got to sign out. Okay, we got to know who you are. We'll call ahead and contact the individual. We say you're going. They say they don't know you, got to turn around and go the other way. Okay, that's how you take control of your community. Food, clothing, shelter. Every vacant lot up in there has to have food growing on it. Raw fruits and vegetables, fruit trees, pecan trees, the whole ball of wax. You can grow that right where you are. All right. Then on the outskirts of your community, you can set up little tables and fruit stands and stuff. People come by and they'll buy what you got out there. You can have more than food out there. You can have the aquaponic system set up where you can have the organic fish and fruit and vegetables, and people will buy that. Stores will come there and buy it from you because you are the best. You are organized, and you're different from anything else out there because you're organized. Everybody on the same page. You got young men and young women up in there. They need employment. We can cut yards. We can have car washes. We can do all that at that race fund. But the money have to stay in the community. If you got it like that, before you know it, you got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars that you can now physically invest in. You can set up investment clubs. You can start buying real estate. You got money coming in now. You can start embellishing your community. You can start taking your fruits and vegetables up in the air to on second and third tiers. Your aquaponics. The whole system where you have a miniature nation, a productive nation right there in one square block. And then you can start exporting and expanding your borders and letting everybody else in the next block know what you're doing and how y'all did this right here, and y'all need to come on board and get this here going. But long before you get to that, this thing will be done caught on, and you got everybody want to do the same thing. And next thing you know, you got your whole county. Next thing you know, after that, you got your whole city, and on and on and on. And but it depends on following the blueprint. Okay, this is just an outline for blueprint, but you can create a solid blueprint and make sure that everybody benefits in your satellite from what you're doing. You are employing young kids. When they get out of school, they can't wait to get back to their community because they got it going on up in there. They can't wait to get there. They're not concerned about hanging out with their boys because there's so much wonderful stuff going on where they come from, and they are involved in it and participating in it and benefiting from it. So they ain't got time for a bunch of junk. They're excited about coming home where they live. You see, their role models change. You set up some stores up in there. You have barber shops. You have hair salons, nail salons, and do your own thing with your own hair. Don't sell nobody else's hair. And your own thing, your own nails, your own stuff, everything you want. But according to the community plan, no matter what you're doing, a small portion of the profit go to the community fund for investment and strengthening and expansion of the community. That's how you do it. You start off simply marking your territory and informing everybody in that 1 square block about what you're going to do and how they're going to benefit. Because if you don't do that, you're just wasting your time. You see. And I just wanted to put that out there so that we can see that it is possible. And this is something that we need to work on. Just imagine, we're going to say that you got 50 houses in a 1 square block radius. You got 50 houses that's growing, we'll say, oranges, tangerines, and grapefruits, pecans, grapes, every yard in every house. So when it comes time to harvest, we got massive tables set up for fruit and stuff. People can with the best because we don't use all the fertilizing techniques. It's all organic. It's all natural, and it's sweet. It's honey. You can set up bee farm. You can make your own honey. Do all that. You know, you got your own security force. A woman can sit on her porch 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. You can walk to the store and come back without getting raped or mugged and all that. We ain't got none of that going on up in there because we got security forces. 24 hours a day. They're in cars, they're in trucks, they're on motorcycles, and they're on foot. You get a problem up in there, we 40 people are help you solve it. This is just the gist of what I'm talking about. Now, I know at one time that I did the thing about the Planet X thing, and I never did get the segment 2. I'm going to bring that in so we can shed some light on this thing sitting behind the sun and all that. It's there. We've seen it and all that business. But what I'm going to do is take one little quick commercial, and we come back. We're going in there and do that. And then when we come back, we're going to deal with the remainder of this broadcast. Okay? So y'all hold tight. We'll be right back.
Okay, check this out. The entire U.S. operates on contracts. Everything is about a contract. We have to learn how to create our own contracts and enforce them. Instead of always being a victim of somebody else's contracts they enforce, let's launch some of our own. Go to www.newdebtelimination.com. Contact me, Tahaga Amana El Bey, 904-303-9061. We don't have to continue to be a victim. We can do something about this thing, man. And once you learn the rules of the game and you learn how to formulate your own contract and how to enforce them, it's on and popping. Give me a call, 904-303-9061 before 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Go to newdebtelimination.com.
Okay, now before I go on to this thing about Planet X, I want to tell y'all, those of you, a lot of you might be on your phones or what have you, but if you would type into your computer to blogtalkradio.com/Tahaga and look at the pictures that's presented this time, you will see the beautiful plants that we have grown. And these are the standing plants. I mean, all the work has been put in, all the research, the know-how, all of that's in there. This past year alone, we have took in, I don't know, it's probably about 12 boxes of fruit between 3 trees. Just 3 trees, grapefruits and tangerines. And now I got to go back and finish plugging all the tangerines that I didn't get the last time because it was so much. The abundance was so much till we ran out of boxes, number one, and I was glad of that because I was tired of picking. Number two, we had some fruit that was still green that had supposed to been right, and I just received a phone call saying, okay, it's right. So now you got to come get that. I said, how many boxes now? He said, it look like you ain't never took nothing off the tree. I said, oh, my God. So we don't have to worry about a product. Organic seeds and stuff, we can grow it right there in your yard. and you can set up your little thing, and you can make some dollars, and you have a nickel or a dime to put in the community fund that's going to be invested in a sound investment, and we do not make any investments unless everybody agrees on the investment that we're going to make. See, you're not giving your money to somebody, they turn around doing something you don't know nothing about it. No, you sitting right to the table, and you get a chance to vote on if you got any questions, what we're going, and all the ins and outs, and the research and whatever it is that we need to do have to be done, and you can say yay or nay. Okay? And then after we get an agreement, then we can go ahead and make that investment. And when the profit comes in, everybody can get some shares, and we save the seed capital for reinvestment. And that's how you grow. You keep your money in your community. But right now we have neighborhoods. And everybody in the neighborhood is going out of the neighborhood giving their money to somebody that don't look like them. You cannot survive as a people like that. You're going to have, because see, spring will be here in March. It's February right now. Spring will be here in March. Now it's time we can start planting. Put your seeds in the ground. I don't care if it ain't in nothing but a pot. If you want to run a test, plant something in the pot and see if you got a green thumb. Now, everybody ain't got one, but you got a lot of people who don't know they got one, and they do have one. So let's try to do that. You know, I was glad to find out I had one, but I can go do some stuff. So if I get hungry, I know how to grow me something to eat. I'm going to deal with Planet X, and when we come back, we're going to go into the rest of the broadcast. This is just part 2 of what I didn't do the first time.
Planet X, do you think it's out there? Might be. We'll be back in a moment as we talk more about it and take your calls on Coast to Coast AM. Gordon James Gianninotto with us as we talk about Planet X. You have no doubts that the planet's out there, Gordon.
Oh, no doubts. I've been taking pictures of it since 2006. Sometimes it's 2 suns at sunset or 2 suns at sunrise. It used to be that the only way you could really get a picture of it was through the extra atmospheric filtering of sunrise or sunset. But now, in the middle of the day, and like the Zetas have said, when the day comes that Planet X stands so far separate from the sun that everyone in the world looks up and goes, oh my God, what's that? Mark your calendar because you have 49 days until pole shift.
And then when that happens, all H breaks loose, huh?
Yeah, because the crust of the Earth floats on the iron magma like tissue paper on an orange. So when Planet X finally comes close enough, it's going to grab the mid-Atlantic rift and slide it up over the North Pole of the core. See, people think, well, magnetic, pole shift is talking about magnetic field. No, it's not. Nothing changes the core from rotating, and nothing changes the North Pole of the core from pointing straight up, just like all the other planets in the solar system. But when Planet X comes close enough, which will only be 14 million miles from Earth, it's going to grab the mid-Atlantic rift and slide it over the North Pole, and Recife, Brazil is going to become the new North Pole, and the Himalayas are going to be the new South Pole. And people would say, well, they're not 180 degrees apart. How can that be? Because the Pacific is going to narrow and the Atlantic's going to widen, and people don't realize as the Earth turns, all the water accumulates at the equator. But before Planet X actually slides the crust, it's going to grab it and stop it from rotating. So the core will keep rotating, and that'll be the trumpets that are in the Quran and in the Bible and all these other strange sounds that have been heard around the world, is the crust freeing itself from the core. And it will slide up, and then the Atlantic will widen, and the water will go back towards the poles because there'll be 3 days of darkness in the Pacific, but over the Atlantic where Planet X will be holding the mid-Atlantic ridge, there'll be 3 days of daylight. But during that time, all the water will go back towards the poles, and that's at least 600 feet of water that's deeper at the equator that you never realized. But and then when Planet X goes by and releases the crust, then the Earth will spin on its new poles with its new equator that goes from Alaska to Hawaii and continues around the Earth. And the water is going to rush back to the new equator. So you're going to have this sloshing, 600 to 700 feet of sloshing, and that's even before all the ice is in the wrong place and starts melting. So, and with the earth wobble getting worse, we could actually have some 200 to 300 foot tidal surges before that time. So, you really can't put this off of making plans for where is a safe place. But
this is inevitable, Gordon.
Yeah, it's inevitable. And the ETs have been contacting everyone in the world at night, and my wife is part of that. I never knew until Nancy told me that when the Selfish Zetas made a deal with the U.S. government and other selfish ETs, with the U.S. government and Majestic 12 and the whole secret cabal, they required the unselfish Zetas to give them a list of all the contactees of the unselfish Zetas. Because it's just like everywhere, like people, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly. So the bad ones made a deal with the government, and the good ones are trying to contact people individually, only if they gave a list of who they were contacting to the government. Well, Nancy asked the Zetas, and there were 16,000 contactees up till 1980, when Majestic 12 was disbanded, and there was no longer a need for this list. And my wife, Janet Stanley, was on that list. And she's had a really close contact with the Zetas, and we had 3 really interesting incidents last year. And evidently, we've been going up, and especially her, she's been going up on saucers with people from our area and saying, "Look, what I've been saying, here are the aliens, and now they're going to tell you what's going to happen." And then they create a screen memory. So you've heard undoubtedly that a popular screen memory is owls. People go, the mother goes, "Where did you go for 2 hours?" And the kid goes, "I don't know, I saw an owl and I followed it into the woods," or "I saw a deer." So Janet was in the grocery store. It was packed. There was a man with an autistic child that we didn't know, and we still don't know. And he took one look at Janet through the crowded store, and he wanted to say something, and he broke out of his father's grip, and he had his arms widespread with a big smile on his face, and he said, "Owl." And he ran toward Janet with his arms out, saying, each time trying to form a sentence, but the only thing he could say was "owl." And as he came that 40 feet from the father to Janet, he kept saying, "Owl, owl," with a big smile on his arms out. And he jumped into her shopping cart and was facing her, and it was just like he remembered her from one of those visits on a saucer, and he wanted to go back. And the father rushed over and grabbed him up, picked him out of the shopping cart, and said, "I'm so sorry. I don't know why he did that." And Janet said, "Oh, that's okay." But we knew why. And that same week, she had a dream that what would happen to Gordon, what would happen to me. And the Zetas broke into her dream and said, "Don't ever worry, we're always with you, and we'll prove it the very next time you go outside." So the next day, it was fog so thick you could cut it with a knife, drizzle and rain. We're on top of a mountain. We have no neighbors. And Janet goes outside, and there's a several 100-foot metal sphere in the air above the mountaintop, ionizing the air all around it red, which is it's a Zeta ship if it's ionizing orange or red. And then it stayed for about 5 minutes, and then it winked right out. And it never actually moved. It just sort of winked in and winked out in the same location. And then she also had a dream, and her sister Nancy never calls. 25 years we've been together, her sister Nancy has called like one time. So she's telling me she had a dream that the Zetas took Nancy and a whole bunch of her friends from the town where Nancy lives up on a ship, and Janet was showing them around and introducing them to the ETs, and they were talking about the future. And all of her friends were wrapped in attention, but her sister was going around touching everything in the ship. She was marveling at the technology, and Janet kept going, "Nancy, get over here." And so as Janet's telling me that, at 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning, the phone rings, and it's Nancy, and she goes, "Is Gordon there?" And so she gave the phone to me, and she said, "Did you see that beautiful, beautiful full moon last night?" She goes, "I woke up, I saw it, I couldn't get it out of my mind, and I tried to wake my husband, he wouldn't wake. So I lay back down looking out the window and patted the comforter, and as I patted it, all these little sparkles went up and filled the whole room." And she goes, "I know my comforter's from China, and it's radioactive. Do you have a Geiger counter?" And I said, "Well, yes, I do, but I don't think it's going to measure any radiation." And I said, "But Nancy, you're married to a fisherman. It was the new moon last night. There was no full moon. That was the saucer that you were on with your sister."
How about that? Let's take some calls here for you.
Yeah.
Let's go to Frank in Atlanta, Georgia. Frank, go ahead. You're on Coast to Coast.
Hey, George, how you doing?
Good. You're on with Gordon.
I just wanted to get off the subject for the moment. I wanted to explain to you what I found out about this government.
Well, no. That's not what we're talking about tonight. Open lines will be Friday, so you can call me then. Let's go to Madison, Wisconsin. It's Bill's turn on Coast to Coast.
Thank you for taking my call. Something happened that lowered the ability of the people in ancient Egypt to build the later pyramids after the Great Pyramid was built. There is controversy as to actually in what time age the Great Pyramid was built. Now, I feel that the listeners may enjoy hearing the likely true meaning of some of the terms you have used. For example, Nephilim. That is a Finno-Ugric term, ne-ulibet, the higher ones, the ones up high. They may have come down from the north, or they may have come down from some other planet or whatever. Then also Anunnaki. That is a Finno-Ugric term. The Ennenakiat, the foreseers. And pyramid, Pyramita, the wheel measure. That pyramid was built in stone to measure time. And, the Sphinx is Vinci, a clue. And I could go on and on some of these terms. I don't want to say that I'm knowledgeable in everything, but I do suggest that nice people like you, George and others, if you have the time, it's a very hard language to learn, but you might want to take a look at looking to see if you can learn some Finno-Ugric, especially.
Well, that is a lot. It is a lot to learn. What language do they speak, Gordon? What's it called? The Zetas.
I actually don't know, but all we know about them is from the Sumerian tablets, and there's huge records of that. And they say that they came down and they were mining gold perhaps as long as 1 million years ago, and after 600,000 years ago of that, they said, why don't we create, using DNA, some people to mine the gold for us? And so that's where the human race, that's why anthropologists say all mankind came from one woman in Africa 400,000 years ago. And then they discovered a city with Google Earth that's 200 miles by 150 miles. They carbon dated some of the wood there at 250,000 years ago, and they know that city held 2 million people, and it was next to the gold fields in South Africa. So, but the pyramids, you see, Planet X comes from the direction of Orion, and the three principal pyramids are laid out as the stars in Orion's belt. And they were put in the center of the Earth masses so that in future pole shifts they'd always be able to see these gleaming white pyramids with the gold caps from space, and they would know where they are from there and be able to go find the gold fields and everything else they were doing. But the other pyramids, they actually gave blueprints to the Egyptians about how to build them and other buildings that they built. And there were other humans, not Anunnaki, because they really aren't that, they are no geniuses. And they had normal technology we have today, like rocket ships and stuff, and that's what they still have. They don't have flying saucers and things. And so at that time, the Zetas were in contact with the Egyptians too. And this archaeologist, Flanders Petrie, who died and left his house in Jerusalem, they found a hidden room behind his bookcase, and in there were actual bas-relief carvings of Zetas from Egyptian times.
What do they look like?
They look exactly like the Greys with the big eyes.
That's what I thought.
Noses.
Okay.
Yeah, and and you've seen the famous hieroglyph somewhere where it shows in Egypt that shows a helicopter, a jet plane.
Yeah, the one from Abydos.
Exactly. So, there's been contact with all kinds of extraterrestrials over the years. But what's really happening now is this is a graduation. The Anunnaki have been kicked off. They went to Mars. That's why we sent the rover to the Gale crater. It's the deepest crater on Earth. It's 12,000 feet below sea level. If there's any moisture anywhere, that's where you would go, and that's where they went. And instead of bringing elk who can lick lichen off of rocks, they brought sheep and goats with hay, and in the hay were mice and rats, and there were birds, and there's pieces of wood. And all these rover pictures, you really got to go look at the anomalies from the I think it's called the Curiosity rover in the Gale crater. They've got communications towers. They've got holes drilled and a drill to drill the holes next to a skeleton, and Anunnaki dolls, be blowing around in the wind. I mean, it's just incredible what this rover picks up. Jewelry.
What do you think happened to the planet, Gordon? What happened to Mars?
Well, see, they went there first, and Mars was covered with oceans, had a beautiful atmosphere, no animals, no pesky mosquitoes and anything like that. And they sluiced gold. Gold is 20 times heavier than water. And what they did was, and they didn't have nuclear plants, and they didn't have any technology to pump water, so they noticed there were these huge caverns under the surface. So they sluiced the gold by draining it down in under the surface. And when they finally drained the last bit of the oceans, the atmosphere changed, and they're like, oh, damn, now we have to go to Earth. So they were in, and this was, if they came to Earth 1 million years ago, they might have been on Mars for the 4 million years before that. And so they would mine the gold and then put it up into their own space stations and then offload it to Planet X as soon as it came into the solar system, because it's like trying to catch a dog in a corner. You dart to the left, the dog darts to the left. You dart to the right, the dog darts to the left again, So it's like an hour later, you still haven't caught the dog. So Planet X is trying to get by Earth, and we don't know the day it's going to happen. And they would offload the gold onto Planet X as soon as they could, and then they powderized it and put it in their atmosphere like a space plane.
Just like Sitchin had said.
Exactly. Sitchin was exactly right, except for one thing: the calculation of when it would come back. Except for that, it's verbatim. He got it right.
Yep. Let's go next to George in San Antonio, Texas, where I was last weekend. Hi, George.
I'm sorry I missed you.
Had a great time there.
Spot on information today. I called you maybe a month ago when you had two men talking about angels, and I told them that I had a conversation with Archangel Michael, and that he asked me if I was ready to be of service to him.
Right, I remember that.
Okay, well, I do have a long relationship with Archangel Michael. And from what I understand, he is going to move this planet from the fourth, not from the third to the fourth, but the third to the fifth, and fifth dimension. And the like your light worker was saying, now is the time for us to really clean up our acts and bring in as much light and meditation and love as we can. Because as he said, the whole planet is going in mass. Every person on it will go to the fifth. And then you'll have great ability to manifest. So those of us who are not really attuned to that dimension better watch out what they think, because they'll manifest it, and they will know that they're not ready for that dimension, and they will be moved to another planet of a vibration where they can still process their karma. He also mentioned of communities and how to build your homes, kind of like monolithic domes, and you put certain crystals in it, and it will become like a radio receiver for you, and you can communicate with the higher life forms. The book that I would recommend is called Earth, the Cosmos, and You by Orpheus Philos.
All right, I've heard about that. Almost at the break here, Gordon, and I want to get a few more little quick questions in for you before we come back with final phone calls here. So you believe this is inevitable?
Right. It's inevitable, and what we're doing is we're going from the third to the fourth dimension where everything is separate. The fifth dimension all is one. So if you want to when you get to the fork in the road, if you choose selfishness, you're going to die, and you're going to be reborn on a planet where everyone is as or more selfish than you. If you are neither 51% unselfish nor 90% selfish, which are the two qualifications to either stay here or go to a prison planet where everyone's selfish, then you're going to be reborn on another third-dimensional planet as a sea creature where you won't have possessions. Because if there's anything that we did where we went wrong, it's possessions. So, and the thing is if you only live 5 more minutes, it should be spent helping somebody else, because this is a graduation, and that's why no elite and powerful are allowed to cut school, because this is your final exam. And This is a great spiritual moment. It's like my wife says, the bus is running, are you going to be on it? So this is not only an apocalypse, but it's a graduation. You're an eternal soul. The average person lives 1,000 lifetimes before they wake up, and if they lived 50 years in each lifetime, that's 50,000 years of living in a soap opera. And one day you're sort of like a bad Jack Nicholson movie, and you say, is this all there is? And that's where you realize that you have to orient all your intentions and your behavior around either selfishness or unselfishness. Luckily, only 10% choose selfishness. But this toughness of the selfish and the unselfish mixing together, that's the school. That's what we're going through.
You got that right. We're coming back for final calls in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. On our next Coast to Coast program, investigative reporter Linda Moulton Howe joins us. So make sure you're part of that. And we're going to come back and take final phone calls here on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. Gordon, James, Gianni Noto with us, our final segment, your final calls. Let's go to our Skype caller, Michelle in Japan. Hello, Michelle.
Hi, how are you?
Good. You're coming in loud and clear.
Wonderful. So I wanted to ask Gordon, where does he draw the line between selfishness and self-interest? Because this is sort of a big issue in my life. I'm in Japan, and I'm actually transgender, and I've had a lot of difficulty in my life with people telling me that I'm selfish for choosing to, change my life and move to another country and do all these big things that they don't agree with. But I feel like if I'm, saying to them that I'm in pain and I need to change, that this pain is real and it's hurting me, and I'm just giving in to society's pressure to not do that, and society saying, no, you can't do that. You've got to do what we want. You've got to live in the fear that we, instill in you. And they tell me I'm selfish, but is it really me being selfish, or is it me being self-interested and them being selfish? And, how does the soul move on?
Gordon, and you're definitely not, that is not selfish at all. You got to do what you got to do. Many people maybe are born as a man and don't understand women, so to understand a woman, they've got to be born as a woman, or maybe to be born in that time and place and interact with those people, the baby is going to be a woman, so they're born as a woman, or the baby's going to be a man and they're going to be born as a man, but really, in all their other lifetimes, they were the opposite sex. So these are things that you're going through, but the measure of selfishness is that you're 51% unselfish. In other words, you follow the golden rule. Before you do anything, you ask yourself, how would I like it if somebody did that to me? And that's the only way to measure it. And so in other words, to graduate to the fourth dimension in this harvest of souls, you could call it, you have to be at least 51% unselfish. And if you're 65% unselfish, that's great. If you're 85 or, if you're 90%, you're probably a saint. And I don't know too many saints. But I wouldn't worry about that. I mean, I would just go around using the I am teachings and say, I am healthy. And your heart is where your soul resides in your body. There's a little blue flame in your heart. And we've been focusing on mental energy for so long, but this change to the fourth dimension, it's going to open up the heart center, and you're going to be directly in touch with the creator part of you, because we're all creators in training. So we're part of the creator. The creator created us to experience everything. And so each person has a unique contribution to make to life in the whole universe, unique. Nobody has your interest, your abilities, your sensitivity, your sense of humor, only you. And so you have a unique contribution to make to life itself. And you may or may not ever live on this planet again. You may be, I don't know, you might be born as a hermaphrodite. Who knows how these things work.
Let's hope not.
The thing is I wouldn't worry about it. What I would do is measure everything you do with how would I like it if somebody did that to me. And if you come to the right decision that way, you're never going to go wrong. And forget what other people say. They're so judgmental. It's just ridiculous.
Gordon, you're an ET contactee, and so many other people are too. What is going on with that?
Well, everybody's been contacted now. There are over 7 billion extraterrestrials on Earth now, but they're not in the third dimension, all of them, only very few. Mostly the selfish ones are in the third dimension. Most of the unselfish ones are invisible. It's like a higher frequency, like you're tuned to one radio station and you don't know the other ones are there. So, but when the Earth becomes fourth dimensional, which will be after the pole shift, when 90% of the selfish, when the Earth becomes 90% unselfish, at that point it will happen just probably within a process of a few days, because it's like the whole Earth itself wants to graduate to this level. So, it's a really interesting process, and we might not live. It might take 100 years, so we might not live to see the fourth dimension, but yet we can feel it in our hearts. And just the way, if I ask you a question now, you flip through pages of memory in your brain. After this change, when I ask you a question, you're just going to touch your heart, and you'll put yourself in touch with the eternal creator part of yourself and all of your lifetimes you've ever lived, and you'll know the answer just without having learned it or being taught it or memorizing it, without flipping through pages of your memory. So this is going to be a different time where everyone's compassionate and understanding. But people will still have interests. Some people may be interested in music. Others might be interested in mechanics or construction. And if you're part of a survival community of unselfish people and all they want to do is play music and you could care less about music, then just pack up your stuff and move to another community where people are doing what you want. The Zetas have said, and all these extraterrestrials, 1,000 different unselfish races are divided into about 40 different working groups, and Zetas have North America. So if you have contact with an ET in Canada, the United States, or Mexico, inevitably it's going to be with a Zeta. And they've told everyone what's about to happen. They started with the Star Children, 2 billion. Then they started with the people who have reincarnated, 2 billion. And then they contacted everyone else who were basically the new souls. But everyone's been given the choice. Do you want to survive? Do you want to graduate? And more I'll talk to people and I say, well, there's going to be a huge tidal wave. And people go, well, I'm going to pull up a lawn chair and sit there. But the best thing to do would be to form a circle with your neighbors and tell each other that you love each other and hold hands and die that way if that's your choice, But me, I'm a survivor. My wife's a survivor. Your previous guest was a survivor. So, if that's what you want to do, go to Zeta Talk. Find the safe locations. Like Colorado's a great place, except that's where the carry-on government's going to be. That's a huge military corridor from Colorado Springs to Denver, and God knows what they're going to be doing. And if you have too much stuff, there are going to be helicopters landing in your yard, and they're just going to take it. So, you have to be able to live out of your yard. If you want to practice this, just go out your door one day next week and eat out of your yard without going to the store. And that will show you how good or bad your situation is and what you need to learn and what you need to do. So,
what a great diet that would be.
Well, yeah, but I mean, luckily a lot of people are fat. It's funny, they say the obesity paradox, that fat people survive every hospital visit better than thin people no matter what. So, they say, people have eaten the wrong foods and they've gained weight, but maybe that'll help them tough it out. You can go 3 days without water, 21 days without food, although about halfway through that you get a little dizzy and you don't know what day it is, but you can survive 21 days without food and 3 days without water. But, the easy thing to do is now say, look, I know my pension's going to be worthless. The bank wants to take my house back. And even if the president announces it, what he's going to announce is, well, Reagan made it a top secret to talk about Planet X, and now we can say there's a rogue planet in between the Earth and the Sun. But just stay at your job and keep your nose to the grindstone, make your credit card payments, and we'll let you know if there's anything you need to worry about. I'm telling you, you need to worry about it right now if you have any intention to survive.
All right, let's go to Joe in Van Nuys, California now. Joe's a first-time caller. Hi, Joe. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Good morning, by the way.
Morning to you.
I'd like to ask Mr. Gordon, this Planet X, has it ever affected the Pangea, the continent, that broke up into, what it is today, our continent?
You think Planet X was responsible for the splitting of the land masses?
Oh, yeah, because you see, who knows how long it's been coming through our solar system. Even before the Anunnaki had a civilization and rocket ships, it's been coming through. So, you have the natural evolution of a planet forming from a hot mass to cooling off and getting oceans and things like that. And with Planet X coming and doing this over and over and over again, it probably broke them up and brought them back together several times. I mean, geological science, which basically most science, you think it's 2015, science knows everything. Well, actually, they know almost nothing. And, but they say that there's like 4 or 5 supercontinents over the millions of years, hundreds of millions of years, billions of years. There have been at least 4 supercontinents that they can trace by looking at the shorelines and the fossils, like the seashells on the top of the Himalayas, That didn't come from a magnetic shift. That came from a real geological plate movement.
Well, indeed it did. Okay, next up, let's go to Windsor, Canada. Linda's with us. Go ahead, Linda. Thanks for calling.
Hi. My question is, you're familiar with H.G. Wells?
We sure are.
Okay.
Love H.G. Wells. Love him. Love all his books. Read them word beginning to end.
Oh, great. So this has really always kind of, saddened me and always kind of worried me, but now listening to you speak, he had a prophetic vision, and he was so sure of this that he wrote it as his own epitaph, that I told you so, you damn fools, that he, in his dream, and it was so real, that man had experimented and done things that it blew up the sky and it blew up the world. And I'm just wondering, is this what you're coming to? Is this any correlation or, connection to what you're speaking about? How it works?
Actually not really, because we're talking about natural events. So, there isn't, this is what happens, and it happens every 3,657 years, and then record keeping goes to hell, and it just lives in the memory of a few religious manuscripts like the Kolbrin or the Bible or the Koran, or and then it comes up again when people have visions like Mother Shipton, and you can read her prophecy, and she describes what's going on and about to happen perfectly, and she lived 500 years ago in Australia. So, that's been there, but there's always been man doing bad things. I mean, they know that there's radioactive glass in Baja California from nuclear explosions and in Iraq. And, I mean, right in the Bible it says Sodom and Gomorrah, and if that isn't a nuclear explosion, I'll eat my hat.
All right, thanks. Let's go to Anonymous, wildcard line. Go ahead, Anonymous.
Hi, good evening. Good morning, gentlemen.
Hi there.
George, I just want to say it's an honor to be on your show.
Well,
and
thank you.
This is a wonderful show. I've kind of been waiting for the right show. You had one a couple of days ago. I just wanted to mention something really quick. With all these things happening in the world, a lot of us are asking ourselves, what are we going to do? And your guests have had some really great suggestions on how we can help protect ourselves from peril. One thing that I've come across is that it's a really good idea to get in touch with your state militia. I know they've had some bad news about them, but we all know who runs the news. They're really good guys. These are the good guys. These are the guys that are doing it for free, without pay, without,
And they're from your hometown, too. They know you.
Yeah, exactly. It's a real good way to network in your community and in your towns. And if you ever wonder, what you can do to help protect yourself, your family, and your community, it's a really great way. You just Google search your particular state and then attach a militia to it, and it'll take you right there.
Yeah, because the government thinks, and the rich people, some of them have their own private armies, and they have bunkers stocked with food, and they're thinking, well, when this goes down, if we can't leave Earth and go to bases on the Moon or Mars, we're going to have our own private army and protect yourself. But the people in the private army are going, to hell with that. I'm going to either kill you and take all your money in your house, or I'm going to take my wife and kids and I'm going to head for the mountains myself. So, the way they've worked it out, I mean, George, did you hear about that Comet P-67 that we landed, the ESA landed,
right.
Lander on it?
Right.
Well, you know that was sending out a radio signal. You know that, right?
The Comet or the asteroid?
Yeah, the Comet.
The Comet, that's right. Well, it was throwing up some kind of a tone. That's right.
Yes, and see, in 2003, when Planet X came around the sun, the selfish people had been told since 1947 that when pole shift comes, they'll all be moved to bases on the moon and Mars, and they'll be safe, and they can come back as kings of the earth. So when it came around the face of the sun in 2003, they said, well, where are the bases on the moon and Mars? And the aliens said, we didn't get around to it. We're not going to do anything for you. And, of course, they're selfish, so what they want to do is create fear and anger, which, of course, that did. Well, in 2004, NASA and ESA together spotted this comet that was sending out a radio signal. So they went there, believe it or not, to find if there were any other selfish aliens that wanted to help the elite and powerful. And when they landed on it, they found out it was like a Coast Guard rescue station. There wasn't anybody on it, but it was sending an electronic signal. And it was really a riot because somebody from the ESA leaked a picture of the comet with the base on the comet, but when it got to the public, it was they photo-touched it, retouched it out. And the dome with a nipple on it that's the main hatch of this base on this comet is the same as was spotted with Google Earth on an empty tunnel system in the wall of a cliff in Antarctica. So it's like, for some reason, the aliens go to this Home Depot store and they say, yeah, I'll take one of those domed hatch covers with the nipple on it, and I'm going to use it for my base. So it's pathetic. These rich people that don't want Obama to make the announcement, they don't want Putin to make the announcement, they don't want Xi, the president of China, to make the announcement. They're like trying to keep. They're having meetings all the time. They read Zeta Talk every day. They're having meetings. Well, where can we have an enclave? Where can we be safe? Where can we have our mansions? It never occurs to them to walk away from their possessions, roll up their sleeves, and start gardening in a survival community with kind, empathetic people. It just doesn't occur to them. So that's the fate they're going to suffer, because it's just like a gang of thieves and robbers. They'll all backstab each other. They can't trust each other. And the only people that can really trust each other are kind, empathetic people who are going to form survival communities, and each person's going to contribute whatever skill they have. And the ETs have said if there's a survival community with an unselfish leader, they will come down and give them technology. Like this new antibiotic that was discovered in Maine in the soil.
And now they want everybody to check the soil to make sure they're not missing anything.
Right, and the thing is, they're saying, well, it's going to take 4 years to come to market. Well, the Zetas were asked about that, and they said there isn't time. So from that, I infer pole shift is less than 4 years away. But they did say that the unselfish ETs, where most of the people, if not all of them, are unselfish in a community, and the leaders are unselfish, they will actually deliver simple equipment using paper, of all things, to extract this universal antibiotic from the soil where you live to protect the survival community against bacterial diseases. So,
well, I'll tell you, Gordon, we will find out exactly what's happening with Planet X as we monitor this very strange situation. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladouceur, Stephanie Smith.
Okay, Moses, we're back. We're winding down to the last few minutes. If you had a question or comment, go ahead and raise your hand. This is quite interesting. But in the meantime, my recommendation is instead of someone sitting and looking and waiting on something to happen, why don't you, for survival now, step one, get out all binding contracts. Because anytime, and I keep saying this over and over and over again, get out of all binding contracts. Eliminate them. In other words, take the chains off your hands, shackles off your feet, and then start exercising your brain, putting worthwhile information in there, and so that you can go on to the next step, which is personal survival. and start looking at you where you are and start transforming your neighborhood into a community. But in order for you to do that, you're going to have to do that yourself right where you are. So, because, we have to use our imagination. Okay, we're going to say that I'm going to transform a neighborhood into a thriving community. Okay, that's my plan. That's what I want to do. But we got people that hear me say that and all of this good stuff, and then they come in and they want to meet me and stuff. My question at this point is, what do I have to show them that I have done so that they can see that there is a possibility? Because everybody don't just jump up and start doing something. No, we got to see some stuff. We got to believe in what you're doing and see the potential. We got to use our imagination. We got to think about, I know I need to start doing this. So that's where you start. You're going to have to start with you. All right, you start with you, and you go ahead and you grow your fruits and vegetables and plants and stuff. And so now everybody knows, done it. So you can afford to tell somebody what they should do. Right? Why? Because you already done it. You have evidence that they can see. If I'm telling somebody, you need to get out your contract, you need to get rid of your mortgage, you need to get rid of this, you need to get rid of that, blah, 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 blah. What have you done? Show me what you have done first, before I give you anything or follow you or listen to you about anything. Show me what you have done. And if we adopt that philosophy and start doing that way, then we will discover that it'll be much easier for us. We're not concerned about who can grow something better than you. We ain't worried about none of that. That's garbage. Okay, we ain't got time for no competition about her yard look better than mine, and I'm trying to keep up with the Joneses and all this foolishness. We ain't got time for that. Forget about that. That's foolishness. That's garbage. That doesn't do anything but waste your time. Do what you got to do. Everybody is born with talent. Some people have talents in doing hair. Some people have talents in health. Some people have talents in growing food. Some people have talents. There are many, many talents that we have. Do what you got to do and be the best that you can be about what you got to do. Forget about competition, because what we're dealing with now inside the United States of America is we're dealing with competition as if it's some righteous stuff that we need to be involved in. No, we don't. If you go down into the communities that I was telling you about, you go down to Little Haiti, Little China, these little places, you will discover that they got one of everything. There's one barbershop. There's one grocery store. There's one hair salon. Now, notice I ain't say nothing about beauty, because you're already beautiful. We don't need to put that sign up nowhere about nobody, but we come over in here where we can make you beautiful, as if you weren't beautiful in the first place. We got to stop. We got to be careful about how we do that. There's one grocery store. There's one of this, one of that, one of this, one of that. And this type of system is in place to eliminate competition. We don't need a barbershop here and then another barbershop across the street. And John trying to get more customers than you, and all this in business here. That is what's called stupid. That's called being stuck on stupid. You can't go nowhere like that. You have to come together, think, get plan. You have to execute judgment. Now, as far as the barbers and the hairdressers are concerned, we don't know how to get around the competition aspect. But I'm going to tell you about something that occurred down here in Jacksonville, Florida. They had what was called Barber College. And in Barber College, they had something like about 15 or 20 barber chairs. And on the other side of the wall, they had about 15 or 20 hair salons. We weren't dealing with we didn't deal with no Asian hair and the nails and all that there. We weren't even dealing with that. But inside this one building, everybody went there, and we had some guys that were real, real good. We had a few people that was a little shaky. And, of course, you know that you do not get a second chance to make a first impression. You cannot give a man a bad haircut and expect for that man to come back to you to get a second haircut. It doesn't work that way. You can get mad all you want, but, well, that's my cousin was there. No, you cut my hair when you was high. And you say, well, man, we get over that there. Let me cut your hair again. No, I'm sorry. That's the end of you. Nick? But anyway, we could consider that. No competition inside the satellite when we are making the transformation from neighborhood to community. Because we're talking about keeping the funding and the dollars inside, and we're talking about taking the money that we have collected and investing in something that will generate more income so that we can expand with the same concept, principles, security, protection, investment, organization, the growth of food products, you name it, under one umbrella of a people that think alike. Now we must admit now we got some people who got some mixed up things in their head. They got some of them got some brain damage. Okay, they're gonna try to bring something to you that don't look like you. They're gonna try to convince you that that's where it's supposed to go. Can't deal with that. That has absolutely nothing to do with what you got to do. They got all kind of off the wall beliefs and concerns. We got to sort it out. We got to put it in the garbage, put it in the toilet stool, and flush it down, get rid of it, going on with what you're doing. Okay. But anyway, this is we had a broadcast. My guest, he didn't show up for the second time, and so we're gonna have to move on and do what we got to do. And but anyway, I certainly appreciate y'all being here, and I thank you for participating in this broadcast. And so y'all stay tuned for the next one, and we'll have other special guests that'll be on, and they'll come in and do what they got to do. But I thank you. I hope you got something out of this stuff that we were saying here this evening. I've been your host, Talk on Monte LB, and until next time, y'all have a good evening. Okay?
overhead, a clear reflection of my bed. We write poetry in motion, baby, as we ride the waves of the ocean. Girl, you got me high, and I love the feeling. You keep trying, and all your life revealing all of the joy I
Hey, I'm a long way from my lady, but I can always feel her presence. I don't care how far I go away. Now, I got a letter today, and it made me feel so good when I read what the letter had to say. I'm gonna take the tension off you, baby, 'cause I'm on my way. Hey, baby, honey, I'm on the way. It ain't gonna take long, no, no. Ooh, just one more day. Can you hold yourself together and remember that I'm your girl? And when we make love tonight, we won't be dreaming. Girl, we'll be together. We're gonna make love all night until the morning light. We can do no wrong, baby, 'cause I'm home tonight. When your man is home, oh girl, your man is home tonight. Yes, your man is home. Ooh, your man is home tonight. I'm so glad to be near you. Oh, how I long for your touch. I need your loving so badly. Girl, I can't never get enough. Touch me, baby. And you send chills up and down my spine. I know you got what it takes for me, baby. Oh, girl, I'm gonna love you till the end of time. We're gonna make love all night until the morning light. We can do no wrong, baby, 'cause I'm home tonight. Yes, your man is home. Ooh-wee. Your man is home tonight. Yes, your man is home. Oh, baby. Your man is home tonight. You're so